Hi folks, this is Jay. Hope you're okay today. Um, Hope everybody's okay. I just thought I'd do a live Google Hangout for anybody who wants to say goodbye to me, and for me to share with you my own thoughts about my journey over the last few years. And so I'm going to put a link under this video, and if anyone wants to join me, you're welcome. We're going to talk about atheism and Christianity, and we're going to just talk about my own journey, and sure opportunity if you want to say goodbye to me, to say goodbye. Yep, so we're live now, and put a link to the Google Hangout. So if anybody wants to come in on the Hangout, you're welcome to do so. To say goodbye, please don't come on and trying to cause any problems or whatever. I have the control room on, so I'm able to boot you off. But if anybody wants to say goodbye, or just talk about atheism and Christianity for a few minutes, if you really want to, feel free to come on.
Hey Jay.
Alright mate, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm okay mate.
Cool. I saw your broadcast from March 28th there. That totally wasn't me. It's a guy that sounds like me. I met him before.
Alright, you freaked me out mate, it sounded just like you.
Yeah, what freaked me out too here, listening to it, because I knew that you were going to think it was me. I talked to that guy before. It's really creepy for me to talk to him. He does sound a lot like me. I had the same approach too.
Alright,
So,
okay. Anyhow, I'm just having a few minutes. I'm just giving people an opportunity if they wanted to say goodbye, Chris. So I don't want to do anything that's or say anything about the past, about things. If we talk about atheism or Christianity, I'd rather talk about that in general terms, and just give anybody opportunity if anybody wants to say goodbye. So
where are
that's.
you going?
I'm not going to be coming on YouTube talking to atheists and things like that. I'm going to chill out. So how you doing? How's things?
Life's pretty good here. I've been working out a lot, doing a lot of running and stuff.
Hmm.
I worked really hard all winter, and I got lots of time off.
Oh right. Is that your hobby, really?
Uh, yeah, it's one of them, sure, yeah. My main summer hobby is golf and motorcycle riding, but I like training.
Oh, have you ever entered the Boston Marathon or anything like that?
I haven't, but my uncle was in it.
Oh wow.
He goes in it every year. He holds records in his age division. Like he's like almost 60. He runs like a 3.5 hour marathon.
Wow.
I usually run about 6K.
Yeah. Yeah.
The most I've run is around 12K. But if I do 6K, I can still have like a good day and maybe lift some weights later in the afternoon. But if I run more than 12K, I'm kind of spent for the day, I find.
Wow. That's amazing, mate. Uh,
Yeah.
how do you find golf? Do you find it relaxing then, or
Uh, yeah, I mean, it's relaxing and frustrating for sure.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I'm passionate about it. Like when I'm out there and, it's a nice day and I'm just taking it all in. I feel really at one with the world and stuff. And it's kind of my Zen thing.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but one thing with golf, it teaches you a lot of life lessons. I think like a lot of people never figure out how to deal with the frustration, but when you're out there, if your goal is really to be the best that you can be, you need to learn how to be positive in the most dire circumstances and, to rise above all these things that get us down. You know, if you can get through 4 hours of golf without losing your temper, you can do just about anything, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I've got
What's your favorite sport?
my favorite sport. I would say just chess. I
Oh,
don't.
yeah?
In terms of like me doing it, I don't. I used to swim a bit. I used to like playing football when I was a kid, but um, I stopped watching football because it's too they get too much pay at the moment. It's like £300,000 a week for some of the top footballers. But
Yeah.
I like watching the Rugby World Cup when that comes up, and stuff like that.
Yeah, I like watching rugby.
Yeah,
I
uh,
like watching pretty much every sport, but I don't really care how much they make, but it sucks these days that players don't stick with their team. There's not a lot of loyalty to the team anymore.
yeah. I find American sports fascinating. I've always found the baseball and your kind of football how intriguing. Like it's completely different from
Yeah,
like I UK and stuff. It's really I find that really intriguing.
it's a different path of evolution.
Yeah. I what are you into baseball?
Yeah, I watch. They condense the games into half an hour, so the Blue Jays are my team. So my TV automatically records all the half an hour games,
Yeah.
and then I watch them while I pedal on my exercise bike. So I'm going to be watching all 162 games in a condensed form while exercising.
Well,
But
uh,
yeah, there's a lot of little subtle things about baseball. There's a lot to learn about it.
yeah. I don't understand it to be honest, Chris.
Is
Um,
there anything in particular you don't get?
um, it's just so alien. Like cricket, English cricket.
Yeah,
I'm just so used to being brought up with that when you see baseball, it's just so like we used to play like we call it rounders when we was a kids.
yeah,
So I don't know if that's similar to baseball. It'd be like we'd have a bat, someone throw like baseball, and then you just round different posts. But
yeah.
like, your rules for your game, I haven't got a clue what they're like.
We used to play a game like that. Um, in baseball, you call it base runners. You just run back and forth between two bases. It's like a practice for when you get caught in a rundown.
Yeah,
When I watch, I have a basic understanding of cricket, but I find when they're running, it seems like they're not in a terrible hurry. Like in baseball, like you run for your life and slide in or whatever, and then cricket, after the hit, looks like they're just kind of going through the motions.
yeah. What about the racing driving and all that? I like your kind of races that you have. So like
NASCAR?
yeah, like really way out stuff. Looks good.
Yeah, I like to watch NASCAR racing. It's fun. People don't get it where you're just always turning left. It's the usual criticism, but there's a lot of strategy, in NASCAR, there's 43 guys in a pack, and it's all about racing the other drivers, as opposed to Formula One, which tends to boil down to who has the best technology. So,
Mm, mm.
but I also like rally racing and motorcycle racing. It's kind of my favorite to watch right now. They're trying to watch the MotoGP.
Yeah, yeah, I like that.
Those guys are right on the very edge, man. They're like threshold breaking and getting their elbows down in the turns and stuff. They're just right on the line.
So what have you been talking about as atheists recently? Have you been discussing any philosophical issues or anything,
Mm,
or reading anything?
uh, Not really. I mean, I'm pretty secure in my lack of belief myself, so it's more just shooting down bad ideas more than coming up with new ones.
Mm.
But I mean, the G-Man had the world in a bit of a kerfuffle this weekend because a lot of people put themselves on the line and believed him when he said that he was going to be an atheist and wanted to support him because they thought that he might have a lot of emotional trauma.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
a lot of people were are trying to reconcile that, and I think those people they did the right thing, they shouldn't be ashamed for believing them.
yeah, yeah.
So,
So why aren't you a Christian then, Chris? Is it any specific arguments or thoughts that you feel that just don't add up with Christianity, or?
well, no, I mean it's not one specific thing. I mean I was raised in a secular household, and
Mm,
my parents taught me critical thinking, and didn't, and they said I could be whatever religion I wanted to be, and they would take me to whichever church I wanted. Um, but I did read the Bible a few times as a child, or well, not the whole thing, but parts of it and whatnot, and it just never seemed plausible to me. And basically, all the religions that I've investigated um, don't seem plausible to me. So I like ancient Chinese philosophy and whatnot. I think there's a lot of good,
mm, mm,
a lot of wisdom in that, and that's kind of helped me shape my worldview and help me deal with some things in life.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but just yeah, like Christianity to me is no more believable than Hinduism or Islam or any other religion that I've encountered.
mm. Do you understand like what the main message of Christianity is? Like, can I just read a verse, Romans? Um, just read one verse, and I just would like you to comment on what you think about the verse, and
Sure.
what you think Christianity is, and this verse. It's Romans 3, 23 to 25. It says, "For all have sinned and all fall short of God's glorious standard. Yet now God, in His glorious kindness, declares us not guilty. He has done this through Christ Jesus, who has freed us by taking away our sins. For God sent Jesus to take the punishment for our sins and to satisfy God's anger against us. We are made right with God when we believe that Jesus shed His blood, sacrificing His life for us. God was being entirely fair and just when He did not punish those who sinned in former times, and He is entirely fair and just in this present time when He declares sinners to be right in His sight because they believe in Jesus." And so that's Romans 3, 23 to 26. So I just wondered what your thoughts were about justification
Well,
of faith.
I mean, I've got a number of problems with that. Yeah, first of all, like an angry God doesn't seem in keeping with the way that God is described in some other contexts.
Yeah.
Um, but also, like this idea of Jesus paying the punishment for everybody.
Mm,
Um, I don't think that is just, they call that scapegoating. And Yeah, I don't think it is just. I think I think it's good to forgive people sometimes, but I think some things are unforgivable, and yeah, I don't. That's not what I would consider justice, and I also don't like this labeling everyone as a sinner before they've even had a chance to sin. I don't think that's healthy. Nobody's perfect, but a lot of people do everything they can in their life to be as good a person as they can, and I don't think it's fair to people in the religion to degrade them like that.
Mm. I understand your position. My position would be that I see that God is just, and that when you talk about anger in the Greek, if you was read it to original Greek, it's a more modern translation there. But there would be a word in there which is in the AV, which is propitiation, which means the appeasement of God's wrath. But that wrath is a wrath of justice. It's because He's infinite, and so when we commit a sin, when we sin, it has infinite repercussions, and He has to judge that. So you're finite, but when you sin, it has infinite repercussions, and He has to judge you. And if He judged you from your finite position, you can't pay Him back because He's infinite. So the message for us, or the way I understand it, Chris, is that Christ is the infinite, that Christ is God in the flesh, and He came and paid your debt, paid your sin, and took your suffering for you. And if God is the one who's been offended, and He is the judge, for me, I don't see any reason why He can't come and pay your debt. That's just my thought, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, I understand you believe that, but it doesn't add up for me. So, like, it's just not believable at all to me. Like, again, I don't think scapegoating is justice. Um, but yeah, the whole thing's incoherent to me that he'd, you know, require a blood sacrifice
But if
of
the
himself to himself, and then Jesus didn't even, according to your religion, he is God, so he's back. He died for a couple of days or whatever. Like, people in real life have made bigger sacrifices than that, anyways.
well, well, a couple of things, Chris. Just try. I know this might be hard to do, but imagine there is a God. Just imagine, for sake of argument, there was a God. How would you get to know this God?
Well, it would be up to him, and he would be able to do it in such a manner that wouldn't require a blood sacrifice.
So let's imagine that God is infinite, is perfect, and holy. Would you say that you're holy?
Well, I mean, I would say if he matched your criteria, I don't think any of these troubles would have needed to happen. I think he would have done a better job.
Right. What do you
Well,
mean?
why are we sitting here trying to solve his problems? If he matched all those characteristics, he would have come up with a better plan.
Well, to me, like, if God is holy, I'm not holy, and so I've got to. If let's for sake of argument, I'm in your position. I'm an atheist, but I imagine there might be a God, and this God, according to let's just for the sake of argument say it's a Christian description, right? It says in Isaiah 6, "Holy, holy, holy, Lord God Almighty." So this God is a holy God, and for argument's sake, and as an atheist, I'd be interested in maybe investigating more about this God. And I think, well, if this God did exist, and the God is holy, and I'm not holy, how would I breach? How would I breach that gap? How could God breach that gap of my unholiness? If God is by His nature dwells in holiness or purity, and I am not pure, then what implications does that have? And how am I going to bridge the gap, humanly speaking? I've
But,
really thought of that.
but why would the God that you're presenting create something unholy?
Well, that's a good question because I don't see that he created us unholy. I believe that he created Adam and Eve as holy, and then they made a choice of becoming unholy, and then that brought sin into the world. So it's not like God made Adam and Eve unholy. He made Adam and Eve holy. And the significance of Adam and Eve is we in our democratic society don't understand kind of headship and, like ancient cultures and various other types of cultures. They have heads like chiefs, and Adam was like the chief of the human race. And in Romans 5 it talks about by one man disobedience many became unrighteous, by one man's obedience many became righteous. So when he sinned, it affected everybody else, but it wasn't God creating us in sin. It came through Adam, and Adam had a better chance of success than you and I did because he was the first person with as our head and responsible for us in that case. That's the Christian perspective.
But I have problems with that. I mean, like biologically, we know that there was no first two humans because it's not enough to support a species. And also, if either God knew that was going to happen and did it anyway, or didn't know that was going to happen and made a mistake, and both of those would be incongruent with an omni
So what's
God.
so, Come on, go. Could you fill me in with that bit about biologically it was not possible?
Well,
If you could unpack
well,
that, because
just the way evolution works, like there's no first two humans. It's much more gradual than that, right? So, and there's a minimum amount of population that you need for a species to survive. So, according to everything that we've learned, there is no, first two humans. Just like there's no first two bats and no first two alligators. Just doesn't work that way.
okay. To me, it just sounds like you're making a lot. This is how it sounds to me. Just sounds you're making assertions.
Well, I mean, these have been tested by science, right?
Well, Chris, you can say that, but to me, all I'm hearing is assertions.
I'm describing the theory of this is part of the theory of evolution, which is accepted in the scientific community, right? So I'm asserting it. I'm appealing to science.
I respect what you're saying, but you're appealing to an authority. You're not appealing to any evidential information in what you've said.
No.
Granted, there might be evidence that you can produce. I'm not saying you can't, but what I'm saying is all I've heard so far is assertions and then an appeal to authority. You need to unpack it with kind of meat, put a bit of meat on it, and then you'll have an argument.
Okay. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm referring to the theory of evolution, and if you don't accept the theory of evolution, then I can try and explain it to you.
I understand. I understand the theory of evolution.
Do you accept it?
No, I don't accept it. I would accept it if you could produce a PhD or if you could produce a peer review that could show me how natural selection and mutation produce. You define it, what you mean by species. But I would say, from a layman's point of view, if you can provide me with scientific evidence of natural selection and mutation, producing, I'm just going to use a layman's term, but you can give the more scientific definition. Producing something that was not what it was before. So, for example, if you could show me that there was, over time, quite clearly, you can demonstrate it scientifically, for example, that just a silly illustration. Say a cat moving over a period of time into something else, something that isn't a cat.
Okay, so what you're asking for um, is not something that somebody who actually understood the theory of evolution would ask for. So the problem is, in the same way that there was no first two humans, there was no first two cats. What there is gradual evolution of animals. So it's humans that basically arbitrarily class the different species. So we have to take one
Oh,
particular point and we define that, okay, at this point we will call this animal a cat. And so, and okay, when we talk about and you ask for the mechanism, um, so every animal that procreates through sex has doesn't have clones. They have slightly different offspring. Now, uh, animals that are well suited to their environment are more likely to survive than animals that aren't suited to their environment. This is what we mean by survival of the fittest.
okay.
So you must accept that you're slightly different from your parents and that animals that are suited to their environment have a better chance of procreating. This is basically the nutshell of evolution in
Okay.
layman's terms.
Okay.
You don't need faith to see that, right? Like obviously the animals that are suited to an environment are more likely to be successful, and animals don't clone themselves, they have slightly different offspring.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would argue with that. I think that's obvious. What I'm asking for is something. I'm asking you to give me the. You see, what you described, no one would disagree. I don't think anybody really would disagree with that. What I'm asking for is the mechanism whereby um, it's interesting that in one sense, there isn't a proper definition for species by your by any standards. Yet at the same time, you have to use some kind of definition. So you've had to say a cat. What are you? Are you an ape or are you a human being? You've got to make some kind of definition.
We're both.
So what I'm saying is definitions aside, what I want from you, and I will believe evolution if I get it from you, is I need you to show me the evidence of the mechanism. The mechanism, not on the level of what you're describing, because I agree with that. I don't disagree with that. But on the level of, just for the sake of argument, a cat moving into something that is not a cat. You might take bacteria, for example. If you took bacteria and you showed me that bacteria was once bacteria, but through experimentation, using the process of mutation and that we get something that is not bacteria, and you showed me the scientific evidence and proof of that, then I would have to really take that on board. But I have not seen any evidence of the mechanism, because the problem is it's unverifiable, and it's unverified because it's not done. This development of evolution, um, the way it's described, the neo-Darwinian understanding of it, has to take billions of years. So that is not, you cannot observe that in a scientific lab. So you can't falsify it. So basically, it's not even science, Duncan, Chris, because I can't even falsify it. In order for me to falsify evolution, to show that the mechanism doesn't work, I would have to be alive for billions of years to prove to you that it doesn't work. So unless you can prove that mechanism in time and demonstrate it in time, in say next year do some experiments and show me in time, then I can't. It's just a theory that what you're doing is you're looking at tree lines, you're looking at fossil records, you're looking at things, and you're reading that information based on a mechanism that you've not proved. And
Okay, so
I'm
do I
not
get to answer soon? You put a lot on the table there.
sorry, Chris.
Okay, so the mechanism is changing a little frequencies over time. Um, we have learned a lot about DNA, and we have the fossil record. So we put all the pieces together from uh, different branches of science, and we're able to basically look back and observe what has happened.
Yeah.
So it is falsifiable and it is testable.
Well,
And you notice that you don't apply the same rigor to Christianity. No one's saying that you can observe millions of years in real time. Like you're trying to make it unfalsifiable. But we're able to conduct experiments, and um, we're able to see what has happened in the past.
yeah, not yet.
So we have a pretty complete picture of what happened. The only thing we don't have is the only part that we still are studying is abiogenesis. Or it's not the only part we're still studying. It's the only thing that we don't have a theory for that works. Like the theory of evolution is predictive.
Well, one
And
of
then
the
when you go back to okay, go ahead. There's a lot of You
okay.
put a lot out there, but that's
Well,
basically.
say whatever you want, mate. Yeah.
No, that's fine. Go ahead.
I think it's Professor Meyer. I'll have a look here if I can have a like. Uh, got a lot of notes here. But I think it's Meyer or Mayer. He was he died a few years ago, but he was only a couple of years ago. He was a leading evolutionist, and he said that evolution is a historical science, meaning that it's based on historical analysis, going back to the historical data, whether that be, in other words, it's looking at past information and
That's only one aspect of
yeah,
it, though.
reading and interpreting that. But what you're doing is you're kind of equivocating, because you're saying that, yeah, I can prove evolution because we look at DNA and we look at all this data and we put it all together, but you've still not put anything on the table, Chris. Proving, and this is the key, if you prove this to me, I will, or would, abandon the Christian faith and I would become an atheist. If you,
I don't think that would make sense. I think
well, no,
it'd be really easy. It'd be real easy for you to acknowledge evolution and then just say that was God's mechanism. That's a pretty much more rational position than
no,
doing a 180-degree flip here. Like they can go together.
no, they can't go together, because as Thunderfoot said, if evolution's true, Christ died for an allegory, and I agree with him there.
You'd have to abandon a literal interpretation, but
Well,
I mean,
in Romans
people
chapter
interpret in different ways.
yeah, the people can, but Romans chapter 5 is very, very clear. If you read Romans chapter 5, it makes it very clear that Adam's a historical figure. The point, what I'm trying to get at, though, Chris, is you've got no scientific evidence for the mechanism, and all the information that you're doing in the past is you're like, for example, retroviruses, that we've got retroviruses from apes that are in the human DNA. So therefore, the argument would go, so we've evolved from DNA from apes. But how do we know those retroviruses got
We
in?
are apes.
Yeah, how do we know for sure that they came in being passed on from apes through whatever after them so-called to human beings? How do we know that some human being didn't eat an ape's brain and they got the retrovirus from that, and then that was passed on? What I'm saying is,
Because DNA.
yeah, what I'm saying is you can look at information and you can read it, DNA information, tree line information, any information, and you can read it according to the theory that you want to read it. You've still got to prove that mechanism, and that mechanism has not been proved. And you've still not given any evidence You've still
It has though.
yeah.
So we can look at the fossil record today.
That's
We
not
can look at DNA today, and DNA tells the story. We can see how
no.
when we look at all these creatures and we analyze their DNA, we can see the DNA that they share and where the DNA is branched off into other species. So
Okay, Chris,
you don't have to have faith in history, and you don't have to have seen it happen. You
Chris,
can actually analyze these things and see the evidence for yourself with a
Chris,
little training.
Chris. No, Chris. Just think about this for a minute. What I'm saying.
Okay.
Just think about it, just for a second.
Okay.
Right? I know that you can go to DNA. You can go to various. Hello. I know you can go to various things and point to so-called evidence. That's not the evidence. You need to demonstrate that mechanism. You need to show.
Change in LL frequency over time combined with survival of the fittest.
Yeah, but then you've got to show how, say, bacteria can move into non-bacteria. Has that ever been? Has that ever been done, Chris?
I don't know. It's not really bacteria changing into not bacteria isn't the theory of evolution.
No, I'm saying that experimentation using so-called mechanism of mutation and natural selection, have they been able to demonstrate over time, as they've done it in the lab, that bacteria, using the mechanism of mutation and natural selection, have they been able to move bacteria away from being bacteria to something else? Have they been able to demonstrate that? I'm taking bacteria because that's something you could put in a lab. It'd be difficult to do it with a dog or a cat.
Well, usually, yeah, no, I mean that happens like this. That's how, that's how we were able to combat viruses and produce vaccines and whatnot. And antibiotics is all has to do with that, right? Like viruses evolve, and that's why that's why we can't cure the human cold, right? But the thing is, bacteria do change, but they remain bacteria. But when things change enough that they're not recognizable as bacteria, then it would, we would arbitrarily decide to give it a new name and consider it a new species.
Okay, well,
and this is what's happened with the other animals, right? We do this with fruit flies, for instance, right? So
okay.
they're very quick to reproduce. So you can have tens of thousands of generations within the lifespan of a human. So we're able to see them evolve and take different characteristics and lose the ability to mate with each other. So they actually do become different species. And as well, we've seen it with salamanders, for instance, where once they become isolated, they lose the ability to mate with each other and take on different characteristics, so they become different species.
Okay,
but it's us that are saying that they're different species. They're still salamanders, but they're different species of salamanders.
So, okay, Chris, all right. Let's just get this. So bacteria is still bacteria, yeah. Fruit flies. It's an interesting thing. Have you got a peer review that I could read on that to prove your point?
Well, yeah. I mean, you could easily Google it. Sure, it's easy to do the research. I mean, if you take first year biology in university, do these experiments yourself.
No, you're presenting the argument. It's you to present the evidence for the argument.
It's not an argument. It's a scientific theory, and I can't do all the work for you, Jason. You know what actually upsets me is that there's people that have actually spent a lot of time and effort and made a lot of sacrifice to test these things, and by discrediting all their work, instead of thanking them for all the contributions that it's made to your health and your well-being as a human being, you're just, without putting the time and effort in yourself, you're discrediting what they've done. Now, if you were to go to university and take first-year biology, you could replicate these results for yourself. You could do these tests yourself, and the entire scientific community is peer review process involves testing these results, and you would be rewarded for proving these things wrong.
Okay.
So you could test the stuff yourself, but you're not willing to do the work.
No.
You want someone to do the work for you.
Chris, no, let me come in now. That's ad hominem.
No, it's not.
Yeah, you're attacking me there. Let's just stick to the argument.
I'm not attacking. Ad hominem is when I attack your argument by trying to discredit your character. And I've not done that.
Listen, Chris, you made an argument, and that argument was that fruit flies move in natural selection and mutation into something else. And you've made that argument. Now you need
That's totally not what I said.
Well, people can go and listen to what you said.
I said they evolve to the point where they can't interbreed with the original species, so we can label them as a new species of fruit fly.
Right. So, are they fruit flies or not?
Yes, they are. But as I said before, that doesn't mean that's the theory of evolution doesn't propose that things change from one kind of an animal into another.
Okay.
It's that they evolve.
So basically, you've not proved your point, then, mate. All right.
No, again, you're asking for the evidence you're asking for would disprove evolution, not prove it. So you need to understand the theory of evolution. The theory of evolution is that that mutations and natural selection lead to changes in species over time, and then humans come along and classify these animals into different species.
I understand that. It changed over time, yeah? But at one point, there was a fruit fly, and what you're saying is still a fruit fly, yeah? So basically, you didn't prove your point, mate. Okay? Alright, we'll move on to...
Jason, I mean, maybe I could come back on that. It's good to see you again, buddy. I'm really happy to see you smiling there, actually. You seem like you're really engaged, so I'm happy to see you. Just as far as fruit flies go, I mean, the speciation event that took place in the lab is, I mean, in comparison to the timescales we're talking about with evolution, it's fractional of a fraction. I mean, we're talking about a sliver in time compared to what the mechanism is actually trying to show here, right? I mean, I think that might be where your misunderstanding is. I mean, we can't in a lab, in the amount of time that human beings have been writing stuff down, we don't even have enough time to properly get a proper speciation event from a bacteria to any sort of animal or multicellular life, right? I mean,
So
what we're proposing is in the millions of years, right? And we're talking about 3 billion years of possible evolutionary time on Earth here. So I mean, there's sort of, you know, these scales are quite large, and when we're talking about, all we have to really point out is a very small portion of the mechanism and try to extrapolate it onward, and I think that's what we're doing with evolution, and that's why we say that's the observable evidence of it, because it's such a large process, and we're talking about such a very small section of it.
Okay, John, but the thing is, mate, is that I get what you're saying, but a couple of questions.
Sure thing.
If you're saying the changes in fruit flies, whatever changes they are, that's enough to say on the basis of that limited information, then we can project that based on whatever else evidence, but based on that small minute information. That gives us the warrant then to say that this can happen over billions of years.
It doesn't. It's possible, right? I mean, it's the reason we project. We can project where Pluto's orbit goes, right? I mean, we have never observed its full orbit, and yet we think we've got a very good idea about the physics and how that small section that we've observed translates in modern day in the world that we inhabit, right? And I think that's what we're trying to get to.
So, are you saying that physics is the same as?
They're natural processes which we're putting forward. They have to be consistent.
Is physics the same as mutations and natural selection?
There are processes there are laws that are being observed here, right? I mean, that we're trying to get to. We're trying to
survive
what's happening.
Chris, John, are they the same?
Yes. They are similar in nature.
How is
There
physics,
are attempts to describe how matter works,
how is
and
physics the same as mutations in natural selection? How is plural?
well, there are physical processes that are involved in it, right? I mean,
There are they're two different things, and
well,
we're talking about specifically. Um,
well, I mean, I
I-
understand. I'm talking astrophysics and
yeah,
evolution. I mean, physics itself, though, I mean, is a description of natural materials, right? I mean, we're
yeah,
talking about how they react in.
but it's not the same, John, as it's not the same as evolution. All
You're
right.
right. You're right. I mean, it's. I'm kind of comparing apples to oranges. You're right. I was trying to point out the scale issue is what I
So
was really getting
I'm
to. So,
saying that I will believe evolution if you can provide me the evidence for the mechanism. If you give me the mechanism, then
Change in allele frequency over time combined with survival of the fittest.
well, John's just admitted, and you was
sure,
unable to
but
provide.
okay. So I
John
think
admitted-
there's.
John, let me finish. John,
Sure, please. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
you admitted that it doesn't. You're not getting a full whack in the lab of showing fruit flies moving to somewhere else. That it just gives you minute. You get some minute information. And
Yes.
on that basis, you can then compute that we can't prove it completely in our time, but we got enough to say that it's over billions of years. I would say that you haven't.
We
And
have fruit flies changing into
that, the,
flies that can't mate with each other. So once the point that they lose the ability to mate with each other, they're going to change in different directions and continue to evolve.
yeah, but that's an assumption that you've not proven.
No, it's been tested.
No,
So at the point where they can't mate with each other, they're going to go in different directions. It's a divergent path.
No, it's an assumption. You can't prove it.
No, it's not. It's an experiment that you could do if you took the first step in getting an education in this. You're trying to move to the goalposts to
No,
places where people that understood the theory wouldn't take the
I'm trying to be
goalposts.
intellectually honest, and I can't see how you're being intellectually honest and fair in the sense that how can anyone tell me this, John?
Mm-hmm.
How, from Karl Popper, understanding science, if it's going to be a legitimate science, it's got to be falsifiable, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great mechanism for.
Yeah. How would we falsify evolution then? How would we falsify the mechanism?
Well, I mean, it's hard for me to describe that, right? I mean, the mechanism has to be understood, right? When we're talking about changing in allele frequency, I mean, you understand that there's differences between when we're talking about sexual reproduction, there's differences between one generation and the next, right? I mean, that we have random changes, that certain alleles get passed on, certain ones don't, and that we have mutations that can occur between generations, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we know that, and you're kind of just saying, well, that can't just change the species, right? But the thing is, when we're talking about evolution, you need to consider the idea of isolation. It's a very important concept in evolution. So there has to be some sort of sexual isolation, physical isolation. There has to be a point where the population is cut off, or the environment changes in which the population, that new allele that has been developed or has been passed on for a certain amount, becomes an advantage or a disadvantage. And that's what's going to choose that organism to pass on its allele frequencies, right? Now, you raise a good point that falsifiability makes it a little tough to point out. We can't exactly see how each one that has happened, how exactly that happened. You're right, because the mechanism by which that happened can be different in the environment for each different type of allele. But what we could prove is that alleles never change. I mean, if I was just giving out, if we could somehow prove that you couldn't get beyond a certain point, it would be you could really say that wasn't a possible mechanism anymore, right? But I don't think that we've seen that, right? I mean,
We're
the
able to
speciation
replicate
events.
results that show the change, and no one's able to show that they don't change. So no one has been able to falsify the results. And if you could do that, you would win an award. You'd be the greatest scientist that ever lived. But we're able to replicate these experiments and come up with the same results all the time.
Yeah, but the results. I'm sorry, Chris. and John, but the results are you don't get. When you're talking about change over time, no one's arguing that there is change over time.
Mm-hmm.
We can see that finches will change in a variety of ways in their different environments. Nobody's arguing against that. But it's
right.
the extent of the change over time that we experience or that we see, that does not demonstrate or give you the license then to say, because of seeing finches changing in different environments, in different aspects, that then gives us the evidence then to say on that small scale that we can say over billions of years it will move into, finches and other things will move into not being finches. That's the
Okay, Jason. So our data is the fossil record and DNA. What's your data to suggest that this is not possible?
Well, I would say that, first of all, philosophically, that if evolution is true, for me, I'm not a scientist, so I would deal with it first philosophically. First of all, there's no.
So you don't have data. You're going to appeal to philosophy.
No. I'll move on to data.
Well, I asked you for data with all due respect.
Well, information in the DNA. There's information there, and I don't see where you get information, how you can account for that without coming into thinking about some kind of divine entity that's put that information there. I would also say
that's not data.
Well, how much information is in DNA?
Well, we labeled it as information, but it's basically a strain of proteins.
Yeah,
you wouldn't recognize it as information.
No, there's actually a language within the DNA. There's codes within the DNA.
No, we've labeled it as a code.
Wait a minute. There's more information in DNA than there is in the Encyclopedia Britannica, yeah?
It's not something that you would recognize as a code. It's not something that you would recognize as information. It's not something that you would use as a language. These are terms that we apply to it as we study it, because we're anthropomorphizing to it, but really it's a strain of proteins.
Yeah, but within those strain of proteins, there's multiple actions that are functioning together. There's multiple languages. There's multiple information there.
Right, but that's not actually a language or a code, right? I mean, that's how we describe the natural process, but it's, the language code part is only our attempt to decode it, right? I mean, we're in our attempt to simplify it into a point where we can describe it, we've had to use the language of code. Okay. But I think processes, and you even said kind of in that there's multiple processes and multiple languages. There's different things that are happening when we're recombining DNA, other than what happens when we're talking here, when we read the Encyclopedia Britannica.
But that would be more consistent with a creationist position than an evolutionist position. If it was an evolutionist position, if everything started by chance, how do you get order within chance? How do you get process? How do you get information from chance?
The theory of evolution says nothing about everything starting from chance. That's abiogenesis.
Yeah.
And that's not the theory of abiogenesis either. And DNA is exactly what we would expect to find if the theory of evolution was true.
Okay. Here's the deal though, right? What I find very interesting, you're very, very clear on this is abiogenesis here, very, very specific and clear. This is evolution here, yeah? You're very clear on the definitions of those.
They're two different questions asked. You
yeah? Okay. Well, here's what I find very interesting.
Jumped from evolution to where life started. So evolution deals with after life has already started. So you hop to a completely different subject there, and that's why we pointed it out.
Yeah, but let me just point something out there about language. We go from abiogenesis to evolution, and you're saying that it's very clear and defined. Yet when it comes to species, when it comes to terms like that, if I say cat, you say, well, you'd be a bit too strong in your terms there. It's more nebulous than that. So what I'm saying is, how do you define clearly? How can you define abiogenesis and evolution so finally? At what point did non-life start to evolve? And at what point can you say you can define it at that moment? Where's one start and one end? Can you give me the exact point in history where you can give that definition, why you give that definition?
Yeah, they're two completely different questions. Abiogenesis would be the answer to where did life come from. Yeah, evolution is the answer to why do we see diversity in life.
I understand, Chris, that they are two separate ideas. I don't question that. But what I'm questioning is, in the evolutionary process, we have an evolutionary process, and cats are not cats because they're in the process of moving to something else. They were something, they're moving to something. So it's very difficult to define a species because they're always, in the evolutionary idea, things are always moving and changing. So it's very difficult to define what something is. And yet, in the evolutionary process of when you start with abiogenesis and evolution, at what point in history did non-life and evolution become to the point where you could define them as separate? Why aren't they merged in, and why aren't the lines blurred? Why are you so definite and clear as to that definition? In other words, show me the evidence historically that you can define the terms to prove those terms. I accept them, but how do you know historically that there was a split between non-life and life becoming evolved? Where was the exact point where you can make that clear definition?
Your question is malformed because they're two different questions, so I'm not sure why you're assuming that they were originally one question.
No, because it's very important on this issue about language and how we use terms, because when we're debating this topic, you're very, very good as evolutionists to throw out these words of definition and say, what do you mean by species? What do you mean by this? And then
okay.
Let me finish, John. It's very important. You're very good at saying that things can't be defined the way you're saying it, and you break things down with definitions, right? And what I'm saying is I totally agree with you that abiogenesis is different in terms of an idea than evolution. I totally agree with that. But what I'm saying is, historically, in the flow of history, in your evolutionary flow, at what point did non-life come and evolution start, and so that you could make that clear definition that that's the way it is?
Jason, do you want me to answer this? Would it be okay for me to answer?
Yeah,
I can't think of any other way to say the exact same thing.
If what I'm thinking is right, then the point where evolution would start happening from would be the moment that a chemical or something would be able to replicate itself, because at that point natural selection could start taking place.
Okay.
As soon as the simple self-replicating molecule came into existence.
Okay, but
that would be abiogenesis.
Okay, but the point is, there's no evidence for that, yeah?
Yeah, we haven't found it yet, yeah.
Yeah, so the definition is arbitrary. It's a definition, but it's arbitrary. It's not based on any evidence, yeah? That's the point. That's all I'm making.
We have good indicators to think that autocatalytic reactions can happen in certain chemical situations. We know that there are chemically ways that we can create RNA chains. We have good indicators that abiogenesis is possible. You're right in the fact that I've always admitted that I think lots of scientists would admit that even if we did find a way of creating life in a laboratory, we wouldn't have for sure figured out the way that it actually happened, right? There may be more than one way to create life, and there's actually been good research in all directions.
And if there is a way, we would at least expect it to be very unlikely, given
No, guys, no, John and Romema, the argument's more subtle than that. I'm not arguing against abiogenesis. My argument at the moment is about language, how we use language in this debate. What I'm saying is, when we're using language, the language controls the debate, it controls the discussion of how we view and understand what's being said and how we view the information, yeah?
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I was going to push on you there. Yeah, please.
Like Foucault talks a lot about language, how we use language. Language can define the debate, how we view things. So when you're saying abiogenesis is not the same as evolution, what you're doing then is putting one piece of information in one box, another piece of information in the other box, and separating them in a debate and discussion. And I would say that part of that there's an agenda there that in that kind of language. And what I'm proving, my point is proving that agenda by showing you that you've got no rational evidence to say that. There's no evidence for you to decompartmentalize it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying. Are
you saying we've got no evidence that evolution and abiogenesis are different?
Yeah, you've got no actual scientific evidence. You've made a definition, but it's a working definition. You have to be.
Yeah, but that's the point. We use definitions, but we decide what they are. That's the whole point of a definition. We all agree upon the definition and we use it.
So therefore, if you have your definition that you haven't got any evidence for abiogenesis, and any evidence that they're separate from evolution, if you've got no evidence for that, then then if that's your working definition, if someone wants a different working definition, that they want to talk about abiogenesis and evolution together, then your power game of language, I don't have to play that power game. I can say, well, I want to talk about evolution and abiogenesis together, okay?
Right, but I think the problem we get, Jay, sometimes when that happens is we get bouncing back between the two. Like, we're providing you evidence of the mechanism once life has begun, and we can provide indications that abiogenesis is possible. Now, I don't see any indication that abiogenesis is impossible, and I don't see any indication that our mechanism is incorrect. So I would say that you haven't really addressed either of the problems, no matter how you're defining it. But I was going to push back you on language because I noticed you used the phrase "when does life begin," and I was curious why you would use a clear anti-abortion phrase in a discussion about evolution, right? I mean, it's sort of the idea of when life begins is sort of nebulous, isn't it? I mean, what exactly do we define as life? Just reproduction, or is there something further when we're talking about a life system, right? I mean, does it only have to be something that's growing, autocatalytic? I mean, does it only have to be self-sustaining? So I mean, there's a lot of definitions that are wrapped up in a statement like that, and I was curious about getting maybe a clarification on that.
First of all, to imply, John, that my language is abortion, to do with abortion, or
well, no, it was just a common phrase that I've heard used by anti-abortion.
I am not.
Please clarify if it came across to you.
I'm a UK guy. I'm not in America, and so UK evangelicals think in many ways different from American evangelicals. I'm against abortion, but the language that I was using is nothing to do with that, Nothing
to do with pro-life stuff like that, right? Like
no.
Okay.
I think that's from your own cultural perspective.
Quite possible, right? That's. But I was
life and non-life. We could get various. I've got the Macmillan definition of life here. We could have a look at that. But from a practical point of view, I would say, inanimate objects is not life, and animate objects are life. So anything that, a rock to me is not life, but a cell is life. We could go philosophically deeper, and we could lose the meaning, because all meanings can be lost if we keep defining it and defining it.
Do you think a tree's life?
Yeah, a tree. Of course, a tree has some kind of life. There's some kind of something there. It's not a rock. I don't see rocks the same as a tree. I don't see rocks the same as a cell.
What about germs and viruses?
Yeah, I don't see them the same as a rock. Do you?
Well, you just switched your definition to not a rock. Before you said animate, I believe.
Well, I've got the Oxford Dictionary here. We can have a look. Oxford
Well,
Dictionary.
I mean, but
It's
there's a lot of interesting questions there that's sort of brought up by animate, right? I mean, we can animate non-living things. And
Yeast.
I've got the definition of life in the Oxford Companion to Philosophy. It says, this is the distinguishing feature of organisms is best thought of as involving some kind of complex organization given an ability to use energy source for self-maintenance and reproduction. Okay? That's different from a rock.
Yeah, we would all agree with you
Okay.
on the rock part.
but I think that it kind of excludes viruses in some way, doesn't it? Because
Well,
they don't actually have a self-sustaining system. They actually have to use a host in order to reproduce.
Well, John, we can read more. There's more to it. I only read a little bit, mate.
Oh, sure.
But
I
the
mean-
thing is, you read the definition, which is a good definition, but then you went back to rocks, right? Like, either we'll use that definition or the not a rock definition. I don't know why you're bringing not a rock into it. It's not a good way to proceed.
Well, yeah, I think as long as something can sort of self-replicate, then
It-
drawing a distinction between what say you say it isn't life and what that life will end up as. I mean, unless you're saying it becomes life at some point along the way, it's not really worth saying that is life and that isn't life.
You say that again, Roma?
I'm just saying, like, say you have like the first life and it's just a self-replicating molecule or RNA or whatever. You might say that's not life because it's just a molecule that's nothing about it. But there's not really much of a distinction between what we are and what that was. That eventually became us. So unless you're going to say that at some point it became life, then there's not really a distinction between.
So are you saying that? So what's the implication of what you're saying there?
But basically that we shouldn't just the definition of life is not really won't really get anywhere. It's not really important.
So no, this isn't again importance with language. This is another language game that you're bringing up here. If you're saying that there's no difference, so from your conclusion then, so are you saying that a rock has the same value as a baby?
No, I'm saying
Obviously not.
I'm not saying anything about value. But
Well, yeah, well, if you're saying that there's no difference in terms of life between a rock and a cell,
no, I'm not. I'm not.
okay.
I'm not saying a rock is alive. I'm saying that as long as something can self-replicate or something along those lines, it's pretty much alive. I mean, it does get into hard things with like infertility and things like that. But
I think the point here, Jay, is that the definition of life it has multiple parts to it that we attribute to something that once we call it alive, and I think we're all agreeing on what is alive. Babies, when they're alive, they're alive. Trees, as long as they're growing, they're still alive. So I think we're all kind of agreeing on what alive means. But I think the point here, Jay, is that once you start paring down properties out of what we call alive, there is a point where it is possible to just be replicating and not doing any of the other things, or just be reproducing and not really be doing something else, right? I mean, we can pare down the definition of life to a certain point, and I think that's where we're arguing. Where does that point where it's no longer life but doing something that we might consider life-like?
Right. So you're saying that
Because life just isn't a singular thing. It's not just, we don't just look at something and say that's alive. We have to analyze the processes and the properties of this thing in order to really consider its aliveness, right?
so if I can't give a definition of life, that lets you off the hook because you can't explain how non-life became life. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that this is the bone of contention when we're talking about life. Is we're not necessarily eliminating all of the features of life, and we're not necessarily setting up a hard and fast rule about what life is. But we all agree what is alive now, and we're just trying to take away and pare down properties. So I think it's kind of an interesting idea to give it the name of life, but I think
Okay.
sometimes we might push the definition
Okay.
that we're using in a
Let's
colloquial.
take your definition, right, that Chris gave about evolution as a process, yeah?
Right.
So we take your definition. We take your definition. And his definition was, he said, survival of the fittest.
Right.
Right? So if we take your definition and we apply it we strip it down, we go right to the beginning, and from your definition, there must have been, at some point, some chemical or some kind of interaction with some molecule somewhere that moved into survival. And at that point, that was life.
Right. I mean, I think.
So using your definition, we can get to that bare bones, strip it down to the right.
I think you got it. I think you got it right, but you sort of maybe you just twisted on the end there. Survival of the fittest. Fittest is for the environment that it's in. So if there was a chemical reaction and it was fit to survive in that environment, it survived. If there was a chemical reaction and it reproduced and it was fit into that environment, it survived. If they reproduced and it continued to be fit for that environment, they survived, and so on until those generations came into processes or areas that they weren't fit to survive, or the differences between these generations were fitter to survive in certain areas. Right? I mean, this is the process by which it would start. The fitness of the creature determines its survival. That is the process by which we could have life develop.
No, John, what I'm doing, I'm not agreeing with evolution, because you're asking a very philosophical term about life, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very difficult thing to answer. What at the very first, whatever was there, how do we define that as being life as opposed to non-life? And that's a very difficult question to answer. So in order to answer it, what I've done is taken your definition of your process, which I don't agree with, in order to answer your question, right? So I'm done and dusted because I'm using your language and using your methodology.
What's your problem with that creature being life, though? I mean, I just don't get it. Like,
sorry, let me just finish and then answer. So I'm using that to get to a definition in order to quieten your questions about that, right? So I'm using your tools to answer you back there. Now the thing is, that does not let you off the hook on giving the fact that you've got no evidence to prove how life came from non-life, according to your definition. Okay, you still not got off the hook there. But that's an entirely different issue. But go on, John.
Well, I'm just curious why you wouldn't call that thing that's reproducing and fitting into its environment life, right? I mean, it sounds to me like there might be like a hidden premise of what's the word I'm looking for? Like maybe you're anthropomorphizing life in a way, like you're maybe implying that there has to be some sort of sentience or intention when we're talking about life, and I think that's not the case.
You took a philosophical dictionary to look up a definition of life to apply to a scientific theory. That was the first major misstep.
Well, the thing is, though,
it's quite possible, but I mean, that's what I'm getting at is sort of, once we've got the mechanism by which it is happening, and we're describing the reproduction and the self-sustaining and all that, why can't we just call it life? I mean, is there something I'm missing with the definition of life that's not included in that?
Well, I think that epistemologically, you can't just look at things purely from one perspective. You've got to look at things in a multi-perspectival way. And to use one type of language or one way of looking at the topic, i.e. from a scientific point of view, is only one way. And the problem with the evolutionary concept, and especially when you get some atheists involved in the discussion, the language that's being used is what I would call reductionistic. It reduces things to a certain perspective on the way we see history and the way we see things. And I don't agree with that perspective. So, for example, if we take your definition, how does that play out into the grand scale of understanding history? how does it play out into understanding human beings. If you just take the point that history is just this process that we don't know where it's going, we don't know why it's here, then what is life in that context? If history has a purpose and is moving towards a purpose, then the meaning of life has a different perspective.
That's interesting, Jay. I would almost think that the process would make life available to us, wouldn't it? It would give us the ability to predict. Once I learned that 2 + 2 = 4, I could predict that when I put two things and two things together, I would get 4. Knowing the process and the things involved in it helps me to predict what's coming up in front of me. And taking someone's word about what happens, it seems illogical. I shouldn't know what the goal is. I should be deducing what the goal is from the information available to me.
Okay, well, a couple of things. One, two or three things is one is there's no evidence for abiogenesis, so that's just put that on the table. There's no evidence there, but there's a guy called Elia, Francis Elia, is a biologist, evolutionist, and he talks about the issue of language and using purposeful language in describing evolution, and he wrote a paper on it. And basically, he said after 1945, PhD students in evolution were told not to use language that would insinuate there's a purpose within evolution, or that there's any purpose within any mechanism or species or whatever. And the reason is because prior to 1945, because of Hegel and Karl Marx, people used to think of history as having a purpose, and that led to grand narratives in history such as nationalism, Hitler and things like that. And so scientists were saying, whatever you do after 1945, don't use purpose when we're talking about evolution, because they were afraid that people might get grand narratives about history from it. So what I'm saying is this issue of purpose, both at the micro and the macro level, and going back to abiogenesis, is very, very significant about how we understand ourselves as human beings. If we say that there is no, when we talk about life, but we have no idea that there's purpose to it, and it's just a process, but there's no purpose, there's no grand purpose to it, then that has massive implications about how we view human beings and history. So it's very, very important philosophically, it's important about history.
I think I would agree with you. It is very important, yeah.
If you take a reductionist view of human beings and just say life is a particular process, but it's not particularly going anywhere, then that has massive implications of how we view human beings. It has massive implications how we view history.
Can I add something here?
For me, it's very optimistic because it means we can take it wherever we want, and hopefully we can take it to a good place.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, the way to look at it, Jason, is that when you're in a situation where there's no kind of cosmic overarching reason to exist, you can then make your own reasons, and you can then use those reasons to do the most incredible, wonderful things. I'd like to see our species out onto other planets and, out into the rest of the galaxy. When you stop wondering, stop worrying that just the Earth is the only thing that's important, and that there's other options, then the sky isn't even your limit. You can just keep on going, and I think that's amazing.
Okay, Alex, I take that on board, but there's an internal contradiction within your system.
It doesn't matter.
It does, because in the system, if we take I think it's Ayala or Ayala, you'll have to Google it. If you take him talking about language, he suggests that you shouldn't be afraid to use the language of purpose within evolution, but have it a mediocre way. So you can talk about an animal's foot having a purpose or something like that, but he's definitely saying don't say that there's a grand purpose in the historical flow of evolution. The point is, if there's no purpose, grand purpose, within that process, then you might put a purpose on it, but objectively, it's not there.
It doesn't matter. Subjectivity is all we've got, and for me to have a subjective purpose is more than enough for me. I don't need an objective purpose. In fact, I don't want an objective purpose because that would bind me to doing certain things. The fact that I can go completely subjectively and that the species can go subjectively and decide what we think as a group, what we think is the best course of action, which has enabled us to become the apex species on this planet. Because we can do that, it opens up more possibilities. If we were bound by objective this, that, or the other, then we'd be prevented from doing so many things. I think the philosophy of it is interesting, as I've put it before, interesting mental chewing gum. But I don't think, in the end of the day, I don't think it makes much difference to the idea of us putting men onto Mars and trying to get generational ships out to the next solar system and next star system and trying to do all sorts of other things. It's nice to say, oh, well, if you don't have an objective reason for this, then there is no reason. But the fact of the matter is people do have a reason, and there is no objective reason. So it's just also much talk. It doesn't make any difference. And we're still able to do things. I mean, the thing is, Jason, you really like going out and doing your street preaching, don't you? And that's subjectively something you enjoy. And it wouldn't be lessened if there was no objectivity in your mind about it.
Okay.
Your experience of that would still be the same. You would still enjoy it.
Okay, can I come back to you?
Yeah,
Okay,
of course.
Alex,
Yeah.
Alex, you said, correct me if I'm wrong, you said that subjectively we could go to the moon, do whatever, the galaxies, but objectively there is no purpose. Am I correct?
Well, there doesn't have to be an objective purpose. That's what I'm saying.
I'm not trying to like win an argument. I'm just trying to make sure I'm getting you right. That's all.
Well, I would say that nothing is objective, because for anything to be objective, it would have to come from an ultimate source.
Okay.
The degrees of subjective truth.
Okay, but the point is that you don't live like that in terms of.
No, but I do.
No, you don't, because well, let me finish then. In terms of arguing and debate and discussion, in terms of trying to show that evolution is correct as opposed to creationism, things like that, you don't approach that subject. You don't approach those subjects, Alex, and say, well, Jay, it's just my personal way of looking at it. You try to develop rational evidence and argument.
I think you're misunderstanding. I think it's partly my fault for not being clear. The situation is that the only way I can experience anything is subjectively. There are certain things that are facts and are true, and are demonstrably true. Now, the reason that people have arrived at the fact of evolution is because the evidence points there. It's not because people want that to be the case.
Yeah,
it's because that is where the evidence goes.
I understand that. But you were saying, you see the two, purpose and history. They're not separate. They're intermingled. This is the key thing about what if you look at the history of history. You look at Karl Marx. You know about Karl Marx.
Don't care. That's the thing. It doesn't affect me at all on a day-to-day basis.
No, you have to care because.
No, I don't. That's the point. That's the thing. I'm coming at this from the complete kind of point of not being remotely interested in philosophy.
No, you're in reality, and reality is the historical flow.
No, it doesn't matter.
You're in the historical flow, so you've got to have some kind of.
Doesn't matter. I can see what's happened in the past. I can understand that history is written often by the victors, and that it is changed because of propaganda and various things. I can recognise these things. I recognise a lot of this because my father was the head of a history department at school. He taught history, so I've got a lot of that in my background. It's these things overall, for the average person out on the street, simply do not matter. You will get people who can get through their entire lives very successfully without ever once thinking about those things. And a lot of those people will be very successful at at doing things like, building rockets or coming up with the mathematical equations that will work out orbital trajectories, or will work out something that will give us free energy from the sun, or will work out how to, there's people at the moment working out how to make machines that will make copies of themselves, that can then make copies of themselves, and then can be used to make anything you want. And the philosophy, it's nice to think about. Ultimately, it doesn't get you anywhere really now that's particularly useful. That's my opinion.
Okay, can I come in then?
Yeah, of course.
You said a lot there, mate, and I just want to unpack. You started at the first. We started with this with evolution, and we talked about life, and we talked about the evolutionary process and the definition of life. And I brought in this issue of purpose and how that connects to life. And I mentioned this philosopher scientist, and that's how we got into this. But purpose and evolution are an important discussion, because a lot of scientists would say, most scientists would say, don't use purpose in discussing evolution. There's no purpose in it. But,
whether there's a purpose or not, it's kind of say you had two universes, and in one there was an objective meaning, and in another there wasn't, and both evolution were true. Then how do you discern the one that has a purpose from the one that doesn't?
Right. I think the problem here, Jay, is I understand you're talking about purpose throughout history. I mean, I think you can. There is ways that you could look through history and see an objective purpose, but I mean, humans are pattern-seeking animals, so I mean that's pretty common to misplace something like that. But I would say that purpose can't be objective for humans because we're subjectively limited. And I think in terms of history, I mean, have you ever heard of something called psychohistory? It was misapplied in a science fiction writer, but psychohistory is talking about how even in history, people act on their own. They're motivated by the surroundings around them, right? And I mean, we're all going to be influenced by our experience. And so you can't look at history in terms of nations or movements or even theological things. That there has to be a focus on the psychology of the people involved in history.
Okay.
And that's the thing, is we're subjectively limited, and so we're placing importance on certain things. We can say that this is objectively right or objectively wrong when we use that term. But how would we ever know without stepping back and out of our subjective viewpoint? Even if we could come up with really great reasons why we were being objective, there's still this limitation that we're placed under. And so I think that's what Alex is trying to say, that even if there is an objective purpose, we are forced to deal with the subjective purpose that we decide on. And in that way, it's almost liberating to think that that's exactly how it was set up to begin with, is everything was just deciding its own purpose and deciding its own value, deciding what was valuable to it.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's the whole idea.
But that's a couple of things. If you take logically what you're saying is, number one, if there's no purpose, objective purpose to history, then whatever you're doing on the subjective level, it is not objective.
That's right.
But that's fine. That's okay though, because
okay.
I'm never, in my subjective viewpoint, I will never get to the objective. It will never matter to me if there is an objective purpose, because I'm completely subjective. Even after I'm gone, my whole entire viewpoint was subjective.
No, John, you don't work like that.
I do though. I live exactly like that.
You're arguing objectively now.
No, I'm arguing for good reasons why my viewpoint might be objective, but I can never prove it to you.
You're not trying to argue from a subjective point of view. You're trying to argue from an objective point of view. So you're deconstructing yourself. You're saying what you're saying is right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't think many people say things that they think are wrong.
No, John,
not on purpose, anyway.
You've all argued for a subjective view of history, and you're arguing there.
That's all that's available.
Yeah, you're arguing for subjectivity, but if you're arguing for subjectivity, that's an objective argument, because you've got to then prove to me that is subjective. So you can never get out of being objective.
What? That doesn't make any sense, Jay.
Yeah, no, listen, if you're saying that the historical flow is subjective, yeah?
Yes.
And John and you are pressing me to accept that it is subjective. Then you've got to use the law of non-contradiction. in order for me to...
Nate, you've got to mute yourself, pal, because we can all hear your phone conversation.
I don't think he can be muted.
I'm on him.
Oh, do you want me to mute?
Alright.
That's okay.
So, guys, I think that you
Send me the hookers. Give me the hookers on. Send them to my floor. Okay, bye. I'll be at the door. Tell them
An
to knock
extra
4
cocaine.
times. Knock 4 times and let them in. Yeah.
Nate, dude, you've got to figure something out with your mic, man.
I've got him off now. I've got him off.
No, you don't.
He's unmutable, Jay.
He will not be muted.
I've turned his sound down anyway.
Last time I talked to Nate, he was accidentally muting himself. It was really weird. Now he's unmutable, so something wrong with his mutosphere there.
Anyway, guys, I'm glad you've all come down. I just wanted to say goodbye to everybody anyway. So if anyone wants to say goodbye, I've really enjoyed the discussion tonight anyway, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
When are you going to be back?
I'm gonna stay away. Me and YouTube's a bit toxic, so I just wanted to say goodbye to anybody, and if anybody wanted to say goodbye to me, just to
Jason, I want to say goodbye to you.
right. Well,
You know, you and I have had a very special relationship for a long time. I've said things, you've mostly just taken it. And, but hey, it's been fun, right? Yeah, you stay out of trouble, big boy. I've got other places to be, but I'm going to miss you. Stay gone now.
all right.
Because goodbye is forever.
All right. See you, Lenny. Take care, mate. Okay. Well,
Yeah,
guys,
I don't know, Jay. I don't know if I'm ready to say goodbye yet. I've really grown quite fond of you, and all the interactions we've actually had have been under the looming of you retiring, which I think is kind of odd. And I'd almost prefer it if we could have a more normal relationship. But if you don't feel like you're healthy on YouTube, I can understand that. This sort of thing can become a bit of an addiction, I would say.
I think there are other solutions. You could stay on YouTube and have it be healthy, right? Like just don't slander people, don't incite people. Do you and just don't antagonize people, and everything will be fine.
Yeah, I agree. I think this Jason, the one that we're seeing at the moment, has got a place, and I think it'd be a shame to lose you, Jason, because everybody goes off on one occasionally. Some of us more than others, but there's no hole so deep that you can't dig yourself out of it, as I believe Dylan used to say, much as I hate the whining man. But yeah, I think you can, this kind of conversation is somewhere that you have a place in it, and you have something to bring to it. I mean, the thing about it, you have the one skill I will say that you absolutely have is a tremendous power of recall and an ability just to soak up information like a sponge. And I think there's a certain amount of worth in that's worth bringing to the conversation. I don't think you need to shout at people so much, and though it's quite amusing, you don't have to get your man boobs out, and I hope you don't take that the wrong way. But I think there's a place for you, Jason, and I think you can. I think it's just a case of finding the healthy way to live with it, because I know you like the interaction. And I know that you've kind of grown to see us as partly kind of almost like your social group. And I don't know, it's been tried before as well, but that people do continually extend the offer of, bring you into the social group. I mean, look at Fiona. Fiona's a theist, and she's absolutely part of the group. Lasoyo, he's a theist, absolutely part of the group. There's people who manage to operate within it without it being a problem, and get a kind of fulfilling experience from it. So, I don't know, I've sounded far too sensible, far too long there. So
I know, Jay, I know John and I totally don't mind. If you ever want to talk, you can just off air, you can just call us up and we can just talk. If you want to talk to someone, you don't have to do a video or an on-air hangout or anything like that.
okay. Well, thank you very much.
I was going to say, Jason, if you're worried about people's their view of you when they don't really know you as well, probably the best thing you can do for that is give it time and leave it for a bit, or make sure that what they see of you now is overwhelmingly positive. that'll do a lot to right anything that you may think people don't see in you. If you're worried about people not seeing that sort of scholarly side of you and seeing just the jokey side, kill them with kindness. And I know that sounds a bit trite, but like, give the best side of you, and then that's all people are going to see from now on, and then that's all people are going to take forward. That's all I can say. Or you just take a break and you see how you feel about it.
Well, thanks, guys. Much appreciated, and I really appreciate you all coming on. And even though I've whacked you all and stuff like that, I won't forget you all. Even though I say really hard things, I am fond of you all in some strange way. I don't understand it, but I am. So
Good people, man.
Well, Jason, even if you take this as its sides, if you take it as there's one side or another, or there's theists versus atheists, no matter what's happened up to this point, we've all intermingled. We've all became used to each other, either if you think that's negative or not. And it's hard to see someone leave when you're so used to them, whether it's just from afar or whether it's just from, there is a place for you, and maybe we need to stop thinking about it so much as in sides. You know what I mean? And it can be going forward, and maybe we all have to do that. And things like this just push us to do it. I don't know.
One little tidbit of advice that I'd like to give, and I think this applies to Alex sometimes as well as you, Jason, is to refrain from the proclamations, and you don't have to make a big announcement, right? If you want to stay off the YouTube, just step back into the shadows for a while, and you don't have to make big announcements about these things. Just take a break, and come back when it's fun again.
Hey, fuck you, buddy. I'm leaving YouTube.
I knew that would go over like a Led Zeppelin.
Chris,
Jason and Alex, can I just say, like, do you ever feel like you're both at that level where there is some sort of fame or infamy, whatever you want to say, right? I know no one feels like you owe anyone anything, but is it hard to step back sometimes and think like, oh, I need to tell people about this, or that it's almost expected of you in some way? And that's for both of you, really. Like, is it ever that it's become such a part of your life that, I mean, I know I've been addicted to being online. I probably am addicted to being online. I'm online all the fucking time. Like, I'm on constantly. I'm on a phone. I'm on a tablet. I'm on the computer. But for you, it's like another level because you're a content provider. You're making stuff for people. And we come to you and we watch it, good or bad, whatever we think of it. Is that hard to turn it off? Is it hard not to do it?
It's impossible to turn off.
It is for me, because when I was at school, I was acting in the school and having them all laughing, and the teacher wanted me to go to drama school. She brought my mum and dad in and talked to them. So I just like being a character, and that's I've needed it, as you all know, for various psychological reasons. But I just can't help but be a character, like, and I've got to just realise that I've got to be more responsible. So.
And from my perspective, Ray, I am actually the Matrix, and I am running all of you on my hardware. So I have no choice to be on all the time. If I'm switched off, you all go as well. It's just a sorry, sad fact, but
You're like Neo or like Johnny Mnemonic.
I'm like the architect, crossed with all the hardware.
Colonel Sanders.
I am the Matrix. I'm just thinking in terms of the Matrix in the way of Malcolm Tucker's The Matrix.
I'm more thinking about the fact that you're a brave man. You sacrifice your life and your relationship for the sake of these internet peoples, so that they do not perish.
Yeah, I create so you don't have to.
I think I wish like, if I had my time again, I wish I wouldn't have. I wish I'd have concentrated more on preaching and stuff like that, just preaching the Bible, and trying to reach out more to atheists, because it's just been like 99% adversarial, and I wish over that time I'd have tried to not been as adversarial, but more reaching out. Because in my everyday experience of preaching and going preaching, I'm trying to reach out. I'm trying to share the gospel, and I wish I'd have done that on YouTube with the atheist, and I regret that. And I do feel that I've let a lot of atheists down by not doing that.
Did you just say the magic words that you want to have your time again there, Jason?
So,
You can rise from the ashes like the phoenix.
Chris,
Yeah.
Chris, you were saying about grand pronouncements. I need to now address Obama and Cameron.
Jason, what about? Have you considered? What if like for sure, if you were less antagonistic, it would have been better. But just the mindset of committing yourself to being a preacher and to reaching out to people and to try and you're trying to educate the rest of the world. It doesn't leave you a lot of time for listening. What about just focusing on education for a while and have your time for preaching? But I think if you shifted your focus more to absorb mode, that it would benefit from you. I think you need a healthy balance there.
Margie, how dare you suggest that Jason be committed?
I put aside one day a week where I study all day, and so I will listen to like debates all day, or I'll read an atheist book or some other scholarly book that's different for me. So I do take in, like recently I've been reading Bart Ehrman and studying his thing. So I do take in, but I would like to do more study and stuff like that. But I do try and put a day aside where I just like do scholarly studies all day. Because you need it when you street preaching. 'Cause when you're street preaching, you get a lot of people coming up asking you questions. You need to answer them.
Yeah, I'm talking in a general terms too, right? I'm not trying to criticize you. Like, I just mean like as an overall life approach to get up in the morning and say that I'm going to absorb as much as I can today, as opposed to reach as many people.
Yeah,
it's a paradigm in thinking.
I think the last time I was on that show, I think things I've sort of balanced it slowly, balancing more and more into more of a healthy lifestyle. There is more room to move for improvement, definitely.
Cool. And on that bombshell, I'm going to drop out and spend some more time with my wife because she hasn't had much of my time this evening. I'll leave a couple of programs just spun out into this hangout to maintain it. So you'll all still remain existing, even though I won't be looking at you. I'm sure you'll be all glad to know that.
Did your wife buy you that shirt, by the way?
I bought this shirt myself. This is my amazing Atoms for Peace shirt.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, you watch what you say there, Duncan.
I thought it was your Tron shirt. I thought you just got out of the Matrix, maybe.
I can find out where you live.
If you turn the lights off, will we be able to see all the glow off it, or?
If I turn out the lights, you'll not be able to see anything because you will all cease to exist. Because you only exist in my mind. Possibly.
Well, thanks for your mercy.
You're welcome. I'm glad you recognise how merciful I am. Go in peace, my child.
See you, Alex. Take care, mate. See you, Kat. Okay, guys. I'm just gonna share one or two things about my influences, and then I'm gonna say goodbye. And just to encourage you to just read if you've probably read stuff. Is that okay if I just share one or two influences that have influenced me over the last few years, and then?
How many minutes are we talking here?
Have any of you read Francis Schaeffer?
Not me.
No. Well, he's one of the reasons why I became a Christian. He's had a massive influence on me. And if you type in L'Abri Fellowship, what he did in the 60s, he had a chalet in Switzerland, and students all over the world would come. And like 60s kind of hippie people, they'd come and they'd ask him intellectual questions and he'd answer them. And then he wrote some books, and L'Abri was set up, and it's like an international thing now where you can go if you've got intellectual questions, stay there for a few weeks or 6 months. You work and then for them, and then they give you food, and you can stay as long as you want asking questions. And Francis Schaeffer wrote some key books philosophical. He's not like a top academic, but he was really helpful because he takes psychology, sociology, philosophy, science, and he brings it all together. So he played a big role in my life. So if you ever get a chance to listen to him, or whatever, if you go on Library, you can listen to his whole lectures on the history of Western philosophy and stuff like that. So he was someone. And the other big influence on me, you might have heard of him through me, is a guy called Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones. Well, he was a famous 20th century preacher. He was advisor to the Queen's physician, and he was a brilliant scientist. But he became a preacher. He gave it all up and became a preacher. And he was major influence. He's the main leader of evangelicalism in the 20th century. So in America and in the UK, he's really famous amongst evangelicals. And his preaching had a big influence on me. So if you type in Dr. Martin Lloyd-Jones, you'll be able to listen to his sermons on Romans and Ephesians. And I challenge you to go through one of his series. And those two guys have had a big influence on me. Okay. So if there's any question you want to ask before I go, and thank you for coming. And I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Jason. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. One question I would have is, are you planning on just continuing your street preaching operation down in Manchester, or are you planning on going a completely different direction, or have you made a decision that way?
Well, we got a team of about 8 of us in Manchester, so I go 3 times a week with the team. There's 8 of us in Manchester doing street preaching, and then there's about 4 of us where when the universities start up, we go twice a week to various universities around the UK. So it's just recently stopped. So when it starts again, we'll be doing that. We'll be going to universities, and what we do there is we go on campus and we debate with the students, and some preach, some give out literature. I debate because of the studies that I've done with atheism and stuff. I'm able to talk with atheists and stuff like that. So I end up debating the atheists and the Muslims, and the others give out the literature.
How does that work in terms of legality, in terms of do you go onto the campus, or do you stand outside the campus, or are you invited on? Is there anything that you have to set up beforehand, like an area? I mean, I don't understand how it works. I mean,
universities, you can go on campus and they're okay about it. You don't have to say anything. But some universities, we just stand on the edge.
Okay. But you're not allowed into like their campus buildings. You just on their. So you couldn't go into their main library, but you could stand outside on their grass or something. Or
we won't preach on a thing without getting permission, but you won't get permission to do it.
No.
What we do is some universities, they do allow you to walk on campus and just give out literature and stuff. So we do that with a couple, and then others like Liverpool University, you stand on the edge. And it's more or less being in the university because they're all crossing a road, and and you get to debate Muslims and atheists and preach and stuff like that. So
what about like when you're in the town centre? So like let's say you're outside like I don't know, whatever, Shoe Zone, Poundland, or whatever stores in the city centres there. Can they ask you to move on? Can they say, right, move your table, you're actually affecting trade, or is there a law that you can just, as long as it's a movable area, or as long as you haven't got a table on wheels or something? Is there anything to do with that you can't do? Or
I think the bylaws are, so long as it's council property, you're allowed to go and preach and give out literature. So if it's a nuisance to any shops or anything, you'd have to ask permission. But where we go in Piccadilly, we have no problem. We're fine. And in Market Street, there's quite a few street preachers going. Market Street is the centre of Manchester. And we've started going regularly to Liverpool now, so we do Manchester, we're doing Liverpool, and we're also starting to do Birmingham. So we're going to be doing the 3 cities simultaneously with street preaching now. So
Birmingham's going to be where in Birmingham would you think you'd do it?
I don't know. The guy who's going to be heading up that, called John, he's going to be leading that. He's going to be taking a team of us down. But there's a couple of guys who are based down there that come up to Manchester, so they'll know where to go. Like there's a guy called Tony. He works with Birmingham City Mission, and he works with us in Manchester, so he'll know like, where to go.
Yeah, because I was going to say Birmingham's been. I mean, it's been years now, but when the way the town used to be there, well, the city, it was a lot more open. It's been the way it's been developed now. Everything's all sort of closed off. You used to be able to walk through where the rag market was and everything. Now it's all just the big Selfridges or whatever it's called, and it seems quite closed in. So I don't know where.
Well, what we do is we take a table. We have a table mainly. We did preaching on the step ladder, but we found that's quite it's quite confrontational. So what we do is we take a table, put literature on, and we might preach at the side of the table without a step ladder.
How big was the step ladder? Like, is it like a 6-footer or something, or like?
It was two. It's only 2 steps, but if you stand on it, you're making yourself like some kind of authoritative kind of figure, and it attracts people. People flock to it to challenge you, but it's not healthy because you're not like actually communicating to people. People just want to pull you down.
And are all those other guys on YouTube as well? Do they do this, or is it something that they don't do, or they don't want to cross that line to become internet public famous, if you know what I mean? Like, is it...
A mate of mine, he's quite famous on YouTube. He's called Kevin Williams, and he's pretty famous in America and in the UK, and he's based in Manchester. He's the one who got me into street preaching. He goes on the step ladder, and that's how I got going a few years ago. I went in Manchester with him and learned from him, and he's become like really famous now. Have you heard of Paul Washer?
No, I to be honest, apart from the people that I see locally with billboards sometimes, I wouldn't know anyone by name, to be honest.
Paul Washer is a very famous American preacher, and my mate Kevin Williams, well, it's the same mate who I don't see much now, but he was like a friend of his, and he's quite Kevin. It's called I'llBeHonest.com, and it's a ministry. It's an international ministry, and Kevin was planting a church in Manchester and doing street preaching. So what I'm saying to your question, there are other people who do it, but they do it in a different way. I don't do it the same as him. I think it's too controversial.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Jason. Like, I don't know. I was trying to talk to you for like the past 10 minutes, but I was muted. But like, I think it's one thing to see someone like their videos, but it's amazing to see. Like no matter how people act, no matter what, you and everyone else were still human, and I wish you the best of luck in whatever you're gonna be doing.
Thanks, bro. Thanks a lot, mate.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment, Jay. I mean, I think no matter what you choose to do, I think we all have like the best wishes for you. I'm actually happy to see you smiling and really enjoying the conversation. So I'm gonna miss having you around anyways. So please, take that as heartfelt as a goodbye as I can muster for you.
And I just want to apologise. I know I keep apologising, but
please, Jay, please. For me, it's water under the bridge. I apologise if everybody else feels like it, but I just know that I hold no hard feelings towards you, and I do really appreciate your interaction with me, man.
Okay.
Great. I'm actually gonna get going, guys. I have some places to be, but thank you guys so much for the conversation, Jay. Please get in contact with me however you can, Jay, and we'll chat again. All right.
All right, mate. Take care.
Thanks a lot, team. Okay, bye.
Okay, guys. If you've got any more questions, and then I'm gonna go, guys. But thanks for coming.
What are they in the field behind you there? What do they do back there? Is that like a farmer's field, or what's up?
It's a farm, Chris. It's very, very weird. We're like right in the centre of Manchester. It's not far from the centre of Manchester yet. At the back of us, there's a farm. So it's really unusual, it's a proper big farm. He's got sheep, he's got cows, he's got horses.
Do you go on the trains much, Jason, in between towns? Because what I've noticed is that any time you're outside of a city in the UK, no matter how big it is, the second you're like a minute or two out of that town, it's all green belt or fields.
Yeah.
And it's bizarre because they go on about housing and there's no land and stuff like this, and it's like literally between even the smallest stops, it's just fields. It's just fields, farmland, and it's obviously had maintained hedges. And you're like, oh, where's all this drought of land coming from? Because it's everywhere, man. Or maybe just people own all of it. So I don't know, but.
So where are you from, Ray? Well, not where you're from, but what's your background, Ray?
Oh, I'm in the UK. I mean, I've said before where I am. I'm in Bristol.
Are you in East or Nagno?
Yeah, I've never had any. I've never been a theist. I grew up in like a superstitious family. Like that was the only thing I could maybe attribute to as a similarity. But I learned things from that. But I've never had any sort of a firm belief in a god or a deity or anything like that. I only really started to understand that people actually believed in a lot of these things quite strongly is when I first really got into online coming on YouTube, and I only ever watched videos for years. I don't really make content or anything, but I'll watch a lot of stuff because as I said before, I just find it interesting, both sides of it. But I've never really been never been a theist really.
Is there any atheist like out there that you look up to or who really presses your buttons, or is there any Christian apologist out there that's ever said anything that makes you think? Or
there's never been a Christian apologist, and I can say this that I've watched it and it's made me think about maybe questioning and going into it and going, oh well, let me look into this. There could be an element of truth for this. Nothing's grabbed me from it. There's never been an attraction to it. And that it's I mean, that could almost be seen as like I've gone into it thinking like bias from the start. Like I may have just discounted it at first, which might be hard to shake off. But I think even if, let's say I discounted everything I knew scientifically, let's say I discounted everything I've learned in my life so far, there would need to be an awful lot like displayed to me to change that. Even in respect to even believing in a deity, it is certainly one that created everything, let alone one particular religion. I'd find it hard to buy into. Before I really came online, and this might make me seem really naive, but I didn't believe that people believed in an actual flood. I didn't believe people believed in these things actually happened. I thought they may have believed in the morals of the stories and what it meant that way. But I never had really seen creationists. What's the dude's name? What's the banana guy's name? It's gone out of my head. Comfort.
Right.
I didn't realize it was a profession for people. When I heard the word apologist, I couldn't have squared in my head what it really meant. I couldn't have said, oh, this is someone that's job is to promote the faith and keep it working, right? And that's what I found interesting ever since. And that was probably, God, how long is it? I've been online forever, but until I got on YouTube and saw these videos for people, I never really understood that it was a real thing. And that fascinates me. It fascinates me when sometimes I think that I can see things so clearly, and it's not evident to other people. I don't really hold anyone to blame for that. Maybe I do. Maybe I am a bit judgmental because of it. Sometimes I'll call people stupid for not maybe understanding something that I think is completely obvious. That might be something I have to change about myself. But yeah, I'm probably just rambling now as well. Don't let me start fucking talking, man. I've got a Scottish mother. I'll talk forever.
Have you ever read the Gospel of John?
No, I've never. I think I was given a Gideon Bible or whatever it was called, one of those drawer ones at high school, and I think that's my only experience with it. My religious education at high school was more about the religions of the world at this point. But I could tell you, I couldn't give you details. I couldn't give you details or passages or things like that. I'm
Okay.
not a very informed on the Bible, but also I don't think it's important for me to be informed on the Bible for me to say that I'm an atheist. Now I wouldn't know how I'd categorize myself as a strong atheist or a weak atheist or mid-agnostic atheist. I don't really have a title for myself.
I'm not. All I'm saying is, if you get a chance, if you ever get a chance, have a read of the Gospel of John. If you ever get a chance, a chapter a day, see what you think. If you ever get a chance.
I think the problem is that it might be to the point with me where I don't feel like I could read whatever from whatever religious book, and I think my mindset is, I wouldn't say unchangeable, but I don't know what benefit it would give me at this point. And that might just seem like me just saying I nothing could change my mind, which I'm fully open to doing it. And I think from your perspective, what you could come back from that now and says, but if you're not willing to try, then how would you know, right? You know what I mean? If I don't open myself up for it.
I have read Samaras and Dawkins and I've listened to loads of Richard Carrier and loads from your side and looked at loads of your side, and I think that and I've tried to look into Islam, and I'm trying to read the hadiths of the Islam, and I'm trying to educate myself and learn about other religions, other viewpoints. There are different nuances of atheism. I've been beginning to meet more agnostics and trying to work out and read and think about the way they think. So just from that perspective, Ray, I mean, it's still worth studying. But the reason why I encourage you to read the Gospel of John is rationalism and argumentation and things like that. It's really good, and evidence is really good. But also, Christianity is about a personal relationship with God, and I think for me, if you read the Gospel of John, you really get a connection of who Jesus is personally, and I just encourage you to think about seeing whether that's the case or not. That's all, mate.
Do you think we could be at a point in our lives where it gets to a stage where our mentality and our habits are so ingrained that it's almost impossible to change them? Like
You don't want, mate. You're free. You feel free not to, mate.
No, I don't mean that it's that I wouldn't want to. That maybe there's personality types and there's people that we've been doing it for so long in a certain way that even if I was to read it, I could never glean certain things out of it that maybe you could, or maybe if I was brought up in a different way, it's like the seed's never been planted in me. You know what I mean? Like I've never needed it. Let's say like I was an atheist from an aspect of complete ignorance. Let's say I grew up in a way that it was never even a thought in my mind. Like, I'm not saying that's what it was, but could it be that it's just such an alien concept to me that it serves such a zero function for me. It's got mechanically no use that my head just can't process the need for it. So I could read the books and I could educate myself on it just to even understand the conversation better. But it may be that like I've just got past the point where it's ever gonna affect me, or I ever might even need it. I don't know. I don't think I'm explaining that very well.
I know what you're saying, Ray. I think from your perspective and from a general perspective, I understand what you're saying. I think that basically, you know, where you were at individually, that's where you were at, and that's where you're at, and that's it. And I understand that, and I respect that. But from my perspective, from a theological perspective, from a Jack the Lad on the street perspective, I can accept that. But from a theological perspective, as a Christian, I can't accept that in the sense that I believe that Christ is the truth, objectively speaking, and that there is a relationship that you can have for God, and I want you to have that relationship. That you can have that relationship, and I just want you to have that relationship with your Maker. But if you feel set in the way you feel and you're happy with that, then I respect that. But from my perspective, I just feel that there is a relationship that you can have for God, and I just want you to experience that. And I feel that by encouraging you to read the Gospel of John, that you might come into that experience. But I respect where you're coming from.
See, for me as well, what I would have to do is I would have to balance that with like what other religions say as well. You know what I mean? I would need to see. I couldn't just say, well, this is a particular one that's got the answers. Just out of skepticism, right? Wouldn't I need to investigate?
Too, right?
What's that, Chris?
That's what I would say too. You know, we have the Jehovah's Witnesses come to my door, and then at a certain point when I've addressed all their arguments, they say, well, would you like to come do a Bible study? And I say, well, no, if I was going to do a Bible study, I would study all the religions. I wouldn't just arbitrarily decide to study one. Because, you know, we weren't indoctrinated, right? So, you know, from your perspective, it's obvious, but from ours, your religion is no different than any of the other religions out there.
Yeah, but don't you think that was the same as me?
No, I think you probably grew up in a religious environment, in a predominantly Christian country.
Yeah, I grew up. My mum was a Jehovah's Witness, and she used to take me to the Kingdom Hall, and I instinctively, when I was 5-6 years of age, instinctively knew it was wrong. I didn't.
It was still an Abrahamic religion that you were indoctrinated into.
Yeah, no, I wasn't indoctrinated because I didn't believe it.
You still were, but you just said she took you there.
Yes, she took me there, but I tell you this, Chris, no one's around. I did not believe 1% of it. I didn't believe anything of the Jehovah's Witnesses. I knew it was a cult. I knew it was a cult, mate. Even at 6 years of age, I just knew that these people were in a cult.
The problem for me with that would be is that there are people within that religion and every other that are as adamant as you that they would say the exact same thing about yours, with the exact same story. And sort of my position is that it's almost like a null position. It's on it. It's like sort of prove it, and it's like even, you know what I mean? It's.
You're right. I got to call you out on that though, Ray. I've got to call you out on that because I think that what I hear from atheists is, unless I've got the evidence, I'm not going to believe it. Yeah. And if you're going to make that decision and say Christianity is not true, or some other religion's not true, whatever, or your position is true, then you've got to have assessed something. You've got to have investigated something. So for me, I'm not a Muslim because I know for a fact that Islam's not true. I know I've investigated the historical claims of Islam, and I know that it's not true. I've investigated atheist perspectives and looked at atheists, and I just 100% don't agree with it. I just don't agree with Sartre, don't agree with Nietzsche, don't agree with any. Matt Delunty.
I disagree with your premise there, Jay, because for me, no religion is the default position because I don't see any evidence of gods. So, you know, for me, naturalism is the default, and if someone wants to present evidence of the supernatural, I can consider it, but there's no testable proof of the supernatural in the world I live in, so the default position for me has to be that there is no
Chris. Okay.
Supernatural.
Okay, let me call you out on this as well. But let me just get back to Ray a minute, and then I've got a question for you, Chris, which is a really good question. But for Ray, I encouraged him to read the Gospel of John. But because he's saying some of the things he's saying, I have to call him out on it. That I do think that if you're going to reject Christianity, if you're going to reject anything and say that your position is whatever, then you at least have to look into it. Or if you haven't had a chance, if you didn't know about it, when someone brings it up, at least have a look at
I
it.
think certainly for an education purpose to understand more, I could be more enlightened on what everything says in the different religions. That would certainly help. Just so when people mention things, I would get it more. That's something I've just ignored, to be honest. But then I think I'd have to do it for pretty much all religions. I think I'd have to.
Yeah, that's okay.
I'm pretty sure you, Jay, haven't explored every religion. There's probably lots you've never even heard of.
Yeah, but but the point is, if someone, a religion that I didn't hear, and they said, have a read of this, I'm going to have a read of it. I'm not going to close my eyes to it. I said to Ray, I'm just calling out Ray, I said, read the Gospel of John. And I can understand, Ray, where you're coming from, if you're settled in the way you think, and I appreciate that. But I do think there is a thing that you've got to be consistent with your worldview, and your worldview does emphasize a lot about evidences.
But do you think I should read it to like? Do you think that would be? Do you think if there would even be the chance that if I read it that it might not convince me of something, but might change my understanding about the religion, or that it might convince me to lead me down a path that I may one day believe, or I might just realize there's something that hasn't been clicking.
On a multiple levels, on a literary, on a religious, the Gospel of John is a very rich book, whether it be religious, philosophical, whatever. So it can work on. I'm telling you about the Gospel of John because I feel that it's unique in giving a view of Christ where you can connect with if you want a relationship with God. That's why I mentioned. But I'm calling you out. I'm just calling you out about this issue about investigation. That's all I'm saying.
Because could you understand from my perspective that I think it's apart from elements of it that you could say are historic fact or
But how would you know if you've not read it?
But hold on one second. That I think it's complete. I mean, apart from anything I may glean from it morally or in any sort of aspect of it that would reference something else, that I think it's it's completely fictional. So going into it from that perspective, do you think that I'm too clouded on it? Like my mind's so made up on the subject that
Ray, if you've made your mind up, I think you've got a strong argument and a strong point to say I'm happy in the position that I am. I don't feel I need to go and have a look. I understand that. That's a perfect legitimate and valid thing to say if you're comfortable the way you are. But I'm just calling you out on your atheism, that a lot of the emphasis on, I understand the general definition of atheism, but a lot of the language is evidence. We want evidence for our beliefs. If we've not got evidence, we're not going to believe it. And so, from an evidential point of view, from your worldview, that if you're being intellectually honest and consistent, that if someone says, have a read of this, and you've not read it, then if it's an important aspect of that particular person's worldview or position, then the onus is on you to then go and have a read of it. And then for you to then turn around and say, Ray, well, I'm set in my ways that I think it's fictional, but yet you've never even read it, is even more inconsistent, mate.
But do you think it's possible to be an atheist and not understand any like not even be an evolutionist or not even understand an aspect of science? Like, do you think it's possible for me to be an atheist just through complete, just not even needing the answer? Like from almost like a complete ignorance of everything? How would that sit with you? Let's say I don't understand evolution at all, right? Let's say I don't understand any of that. I haven't got a clue about abiogenesis, so I don't know about anything to do with any facet of it. What position would I have then? Would it be just that I'm uneducated on everything, and I haven't found a God or haven't found would I need to find it through a book? Would it need to be, and would it need to be your particular book? This is what I find hard to understand. Is it comes a point where there would need to be a reason that it would have to be a particular one. And I understand what you say for an educational purpose. Like
I
just reading it just to understand it, what your perspective it would be useful for me. You know what I mean? Like it would be educational for me to understand more about your perspective and other people's.
I know what you're saying. I understand, because when I was about 12, I remember me and my mate called John Barlow, and we sat ready to go into the cinema, and we were talking about God, and Barlow said, "I don't think there's a God," and I was thinking, maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I didn't know either way. I was agnostic. We were only about 12, 13 years of age, but he made that decision around about 12, 13. He didn't make it on the basis of knowing New Testament criticism or anything like that. So I understand where you're coming from, that even without an education or without any specific information about Christianity, you can come to a basis of not believing in a God.
Right. So it's not necessarily always a thing against Christianity or against a particular religion, is it? It's not never necessarily that. It could just be that.
Yeah, so I appreciate what you're saying. I get what you're saying, but specifically in this issue about the Gospel of John, you made the point about if I was set in my ways about it being things being fictional, and that when you get to that point, then I don't think you do need to make sure that when you saying something's fictional, whether you've had a look at it historically or not.
But the problem is that just by going in and reading a book, it's pretty much impossible to discern whether it's fact or fictional just based on nothing else but the book itself. So even if he did read it and he had a personal revelation or something like that, how would he be able to know if it was like correct and true? Because that's the whole reason for the evidence thing and stuff like that. If you get what I mean.
Yeah, well, the point is, I mentioned it on the level of experience first, and then Ray mentioned about the fictional issue. So the two separate issues. But so if someone reads it and has an experience, but then there's still the historical investigation. You can read a piece of literature, and you can have some kind of understanding of other types of literature and discern whether it's historical. And then you can go and investigate, not just by reading that book, but by looking at what other books are saying, and whether it verifies that historical. But can I just come back to Chris? Is it Chris? Yeah. Just quickly, you talked about you're the default position. I just want to ask a question to Chris. Chris, are you still there, mate?
Yeah, I hear you.
You're saying atheism is the default position. Now, one of the basic things about Christianity is the resurrection, there's various miracles, yeah? So, if atheism is the default position and you're willing to look at evidences and critique it and see whether it stands up to intellectual scrutiny or not, here's the question, Chris. Have you a criteria for investigating miracles?
Then I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, if the point is, if atheism's the default position, yeah?
Right.
Yeah. So
It is for me.
But therefore, if someone's going to present evidences for the Christian faith, you being in the default position will have the critical tools to be able to assess that evidence, whether it stands up to intellectual scrutiny or not, yes?
Right.
So part of Christianity is miracles. So what criteria do you have to be able to critique miracle claims?
Oh, okay, so
Have criteria? Have you got criteria that you use, like in historical analysis?
I have.
Yeah, wait, I'm asking Chris,
Okay.
and then you can come in.
I mean, I'm not an active miracle investigator, but the evidence that I've seen for miracles is not demonstrable, repeatable, or falsifiable, or any better than the evidence I've seen for other religions. So, for me, the default position would be to not to believe that it actually happened. It's more plausible that they didn't.
So basically, so just unpack it for me then. Have you can you give me 5 criteria how you would assess a miracle claim from the past? That you would have 5 criteria that you could use to critique a miracle historically. Have you got 5 criteria?
Well, no, because I don't think that it's even possible.
Well,
So I don't go to that step of applying 5 criteria.
David Hume had 5 criteria, and he investigated miracles of the past, and he investigated the miracles in the 16th century during, I think it's 16th century, during the time of Pascal, because the French Catholics were having lots of these miracle experiences, and he came up with like 5 criteria, and he investigated these miracles, and he said, from my criteria, I have to say that these miracles happen. But then he said, they don't happen because, cause and effect, the natural processes, miracles are not natural process, so they don't happen. But he had 5 criteria, and when he applied them historically, they actually fitted his criteria. So if you're going to have this default position, then surely you will have some criteria that you can show me that you're going to use objectively to investigate a miracle claim in the past. And I'm asking you to just give me 3 criteria.
That's not what a default position is. Because your miracle would have to violate everything we know about the known universe, and so that's why the default position would be that they don't occur. And if I saw testable, repeatable, falsifiable evidence, then we would have to change the laws of physics as we know them to fit these new things.
Okay, so if Caesar killed someone on a Friday evening, killed one of his generals on a Friday evening, and we have various testimonies to that, is that repeatable scientifically?
You're talking about history now, so it doesn't apply.
It only happened once, so how are you going to use that criteria that you're talking about to prove that happened?
I never presented a criteria.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, what you've demonstrated is you've not got a criteria ready to assess the information that might be given you about miracles. You've not got any historical criteria.
That's right. I don't look at it as a question of judging history. I look at it as things that violate everything we know about the world that we live in. So if there was evidence for miracles, then we would have to adjust the laws of physics themselves to accommodate this new phenomenon.
Yeah, and I think the only situation where it would be considered a miracle would be if we physically couldn't change the laws of physics to fit with that model, in which case I would probably deem it as that the only possible explanation would be a miracle if you literally couldn't come up with a new model of the universe that would encompass the whatever event took place.
What at the laws of physics at the quantum level, do we know exactly what's going on at the quantum level?
We have a pretty good understanding, but we don't know how gravity interacts with.
Why is it scientifically that we work on probability?
Because that, as far as we know, that is the nature of reality.
It's because at the quantum level we don't fully understand what's going on.
Well, that's a possibility, but
no, the reason why we came up with probability in knowledge is because around about 1920s, 30s, we began to realize David Hume's skepticism about causality was actually coming true, because we don't really know at the quantum level what's really going on. So we have to talk about probability, because there could be always something within our observations that might actually make what we're saying or whatever we're coming up with completely change. So we've always got to be open to the possibility. So what I'm saying is, at the quantum level, if we don't fully know, we work on probability, right? So when we're looking at
So you're saying that miracles happen on a quantum level?
no,
In which case they're not miracles anymore, they're natural.
wait a minute, no, you're assuming you're assuming a definition of miracles. You don't know whether miracles actually work within a way that we don't understand, the way things work at beyond the quantum level. So the point is, all you can do is be open to the historical information that's given to you. You can't say it breaks the laws of physics or whatever, because you don't fully understand what's going on at the quantum level, and you don't know how a miracle would interact with the quantum level. So all you've got to
No, but all we can do is assess what we do know, and then base what we consider reality on what we do know. And if something contradicts that, then we have to reassess what we know about reality.
You can't contradict it if you don't know fully what's at the quantum level. So
what's your mechanism for miracles?
So the point is that the data would be, in a historical situation, you would have to assess the data of that situation rather than look at it from a theoretical point of view of your worldview of the order. You have to look at the data of the history. And so you have to have a criteria of historical investigation of looking at miracles rather than rule miracles out just because of a fixed understanding of physics that it's held in probability. It's not
Some of this is going over my head for a second. Wait, let me clarify something. So, Jason, give me an example of let's just pick one type of miracle or one miracle, right?
Well, we'll pick the resurrection.
And that's by that you mean Jesus died and then rose from the dead, right? So
Yeah.
I'll pick that one as one. So that's a miracle, right? Because we would consider that a miracle is because it doesn't happen, right? A lot of people don't rise from the dead. So you're saying that there's evidence for that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you think that's what people have the argument with? You think you think that I'm saying that there's not evidence for it, or it's not good evidence, or?
Well, what I'm saying is, you've got to, if someone claims a miracle from the past, then you're going to have to debunk it from a historical perspective.
Okay. Because otherwise, I could just lie about a miracle. I could say, oh, shit, what could I say? I could say, today I walked on a rainbow, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what's the difference between the claim of the resurrection of Christ and the claim of me walking on a rainbow? There's evidence for one and
All right,
not for the other?
I'll answer that.
Okay.
Is multiple attestation. Is if you're going to have historical facts, you've got to have a multiple attestation. So, for example, if I can bring a number of different sources to bear, primary sources and secondary sources, that verify what I'm claiming, then that is good historical evidence.
How many witnesses would you need to believe that Ray walked on a? How many witnesses would you need to believe that Ray walked on a rainbow?
How many witnesses would I need that Ray walked on a rainbow?
Yeah, would 500 do it for you?
It's a good question, Chris.
See, what I mean is because even if 500 people said that I did,
he could have just been using some sort of trick or something.
Is that enough?
Wouldn't the default position be that Ray can't walk on rainbows, and that would be a good thing to believe until we see some demonstration that he can?
Yeah, but the whole point is to disprove miracles. We could use science in that situation to say that, rainbows aren't made of matter; they're just light reflecting on your eyes. So walking on them is nonsensical.
But I've got beautiful light feet that can dance a dance of dances. Now, does that mean that, you know what I mean? I've got a reason for that. I've got a reason, which in itself is a miracle. I've got a special pair of shoes, and 500 people saw me do it. So, did I not do it? Or is the default position prove it? But is the 500 people enough to prove it?
If you're making a claim that you walked on the rainbow, then you're the one that has to demonstrate that it was like how you did it, and that it was a miracle and there was no other explanation for what you did.
Okay, well,
and then not to mention if there when you have a historical account of a miracle, you have to wonder if there's some way that these people could have been tricked too. And I can think of lots of explanations for these miracles that are more plausible than magic.
Okay, your argument would be okay, except for one thing, and that would be cause and effect. In terms of the resurrection, the effect of that resurrection, or non-resurrection, do the natural causes explain the effect?
Well, what's the mechanism that you're proposing for your miracle to occur?
The mechanism is God, isn't it?
Okay.
So how does your
What's
God
the effect that
interact with
the
natural
resurrection has?
universe?
Pardon?
What's the effect that the resurrection had?
Yeah, well, the effect is within 300 years, the whole Roman Empire was taken over by Christianity.
And is it entirely possible that that wasn't nothing to do with? It's completely impossible that had nothing to do with the resurrection of Christ.
I would see it as more of a miracle, personal. To say,
Yeah, but if you say it's a personal miracle, then it's not really.
no, if you try to explain it from a naturalistic perspective, that within 300 years of intense persecution every generation, that Christianity took over the Roman Empire, that was done by natural causes. The only natural causes that you could possibly explain is that Jesus was a mythological figure, and it was this mythological figure that kind of inspired these stories and things like that, and that does not fit it. That does not explain this absolute impact, the historical impact that happened in those first 3 centuries.
But what if he was a mythological historical figure and people just believed that he did that? Would that lessen the effect if everyone believed it and it still happened? Does that necessarily mean that if we could come up with as many plausible explanations for it as God did it, he was God, that isn't still the default one? You go with the one that is the most plausible?
The evidence that he was a mythological figure as opposed to that he was a historical figure would not fit your model, but would fit my model that he was a historical figure. The evidence is overwhelming, historical rather than mythological.
Yeah, but even if he was a historical figure, there's then the point of whether he was actually the son of God, which is the main part of it.
Yeah. Jay, have you ever seen a magician do tricks that you couldn't explain?
Yeah, on television. I've not seen up live.
You know that people can do that, right?
Yeah.
So wouldn't it make more sense to think that they were doing a trick that they worked really hard on instead of thinking that they invoked magic?
So let me just clarify this. So your historical method is basically...
I don't have a historical method, Jay. I keep telling you that.
Alright, so you don't have a historical method, right? And basically what you're doing is using understanding of physics.
Yeah, I'm presented with a claim, and I think that the claim's implausible, so I assume that there's probably a more naturalistic explanation for things, unless presented with evidence to the contrary that I can test.
My explanation for the first 300 years of Christianity, the spread of it, taking over the Roman Empire, that for me, to understand that happened from a mythological figure or a deluded messianic figure, to me, I find that a pretty big stretch, because if I compare it with other religions, if I compare it with Islam began militarily. If I compare it with other religions, I don't see a comparison to what happened with Christianity. It seems a unique event, and it seems an explosive event, and something has to give that explanation. So,
I don't think that was happened, but it's a bit of a jump to. You don't need magic for that to happen.
So, what is your explanation then?
Well, I think there's a good chance that there was a guy named Jesus that was that did lots of preaching and started a movement, but I don't think that any magic is necessary for that to happen.
Okay, so let's run with your argument then. We exclude the supernatural. So give me an explanation of the data then.
What data?
Basically, Jesus or whoever could have inspired lots and lots of people to
So you're
become Christians.
okay.
And they might have.
Okay, let's look at it this logically. Okay, you give me a naturalistic explanation for James being thrown off a roof, killed, for Peter being crucified upside down, for Paul being executed, for the Apostle John being thrown in a pot of boiling oil. Just let me finish. For Christians in 64 AD, in the time of Nero, put on stakes and set on fire, and then that kind of persecution going on, not for 10 years, not for 20 years, not for 30 years, not for 40 years, but it went on for 300 years. And guess what? Out of that 300 years, we ended up having the New Testament, which is the most well-attested ancient document in history, having 5,000 ancient copies, which is vastly superior than any ancient document. You explain to me how that happened naturally. You explain to me.
Explain how it needs magic to occur.
Not just no, we're working on naturalistic assumptions. So explain. Who was he? Was he a political figure? Was this an influence of politics? What was he? And
It could have been any of those things.
Well, explain to me then.
Are you trying to make the argument that that they couldn't have died for a lie?
No, so we're saying for 300 years they died. They believed that they were dying for a lie, or they were deluded. Is that what you're saying?
They were tricked.
So they were tricked. So does that mean Jesus tricked them?
No, I mean, my position is I don't know, but I don't think it requires magic either.
We don't have an answer, but that doesn't mean that... Just because we don't actually know the answer doesn't mean that, given that everything else that can be explained has a naturalistic answer, that we should just assume this one doesn't.
One of the most important historical events in history, the beginning of Christianity, surely you would be able to give some kind of an answer.
The very least likely solution to your problem is magic.
Well, couldn't it be that James really believed his brother was the Son of God? Couldn't it be that Paul really was converted?
He could believe that without it being true.
Can it be that John was thrown in boiling oil because he really believed Jesus was worth suffering for? Can it be that when the Christians were thrown on the stakes and set alight in Nero's garden, he really believed that he died on a cross and rose again? Couldn't he believe that it was based on evidence?
Jason, there are certain
all the time.
Yeah, people die for their beliefs all the time. It happens every day.
Died for a lie.
Yeah, but you're equivocating. Yeah, but the problem is you're equivocating that religious historical events are similar, and you need to prove that. My argument is this is a unique historical event, and I've proven that because there is no historical event in history where a total empire was taken over by another religion within 300 years without intense persecution happening to them. If you can give me one.
But Jay, didn't you, when we were talking about evolution, didn't you say that we couldn't observe it happening, so then we can't accept it, but we need to take your word for it that these things actually happened?
It's not my word for it. The historical documents are...
Apply the critique you applied to evolution to the argument that you just made. See what you get.
You mean the causal effect of a miracle? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying use some critical thinking skills here.
Yeah, well, you need to help me. You being the critical thinker now. Unpack it. What do you mean?
Well, he said I could never prove evolution because I couldn't go back in time. Yet you want us to accept that what you're saying about history is true. So you're not applying the same standard to your claim that you applied to the theory of evolution.
No, I am, because you're talking about time in terms of billions of years. I'm talking about 2,000 years, so there's a big difference. But I think you have a point about the issue of mechanism. My main argument against you was actually about mechanism. And there is a point there. I can't prove the actual mechanism of a miracle. So I'm arguing from a cause and effect. So it is
So you got nothing.
Yeah, but the point is, if it could have a naturalistic explanation, then it's a lot more likely that that explanation is true.
But you've not given one.
Yeah, but we could do it if we sat down, studied history, thought about the possible the political impacts and all that lot. I bet we could come up with loads of theories as to how it happened. But we're not like necessarily geniuses in history, so we couldn't just come up with one off the top of our heads without a full understanding of the topic.
Yeah, but one of the main claims of Christianity is the resurrection. You would have thought, as atheists, you would have had some kind of historical.
Yeah, but now you're talking about a theory as to why the resurrection would have affected the Christianity spreading throughout the Roman Empire and taking over the Roman Empire. But I haven't studied the Roman Empire. We don't know much about the Roman Empire.
I'm not concerned with the resurrection because I don't the Immaculate Conception doesn't seem to even make sense to me. None of it makes sense really. So why would I obsess about a resurrection when I find the whole thing to be implausible?
Okay.
Are miracles still happening now then? Like, are they happening? Like, are there any modern day miracles, Jason, that happen that would maybe convince people better that we could go, oh look, there's like there's people alive now?
About 2 or 3 months ago that I looked at the book, but it's very, very good, and that's Dr. Keener's book on miracles. If you have a look at his book, he was an atheist. He became a Christian, and he's written the most. It's probably the most scholarly book on miracles ever written since David Hume. It's 2 volumes, and basically he has a very strict scientific criteria for saying what a miracle is, the evidential basis for a miracle, and so he goes all around the world investigating. So that's a scholarly work that you could actually go and have a look at.
And then is there an example of one that happens in that book that's as good as like a resurrection, or is there, or is it just something like?
Like I said, it's a couple of months ago. If you go and have a look, there's loads of detailed examples there if you want to go and have a look.
I think Alex has been waiting very patiently for his chance to talk. Can we just let Alex say one thing? I think he has to go. Alex,
bye, Jay.
Right.
I made a little picture for you because Chris kept interrupting me while I was trying to make a couple of jokes.
All right.
But that's Chris for you. All right, best of luck. Hope you enjoyed my pick.
All right, take care, man.
Bye.
All right.
But like, is there like if a miracle happened now, would there? And let's say like someone recorded it on a video camera, and we could go through it and we could look at every aspect of it and say, well, hang on. The light's not right in that part, or
I think
there's not. Like, I mean, you know what I mean?
I think his is more detailed than that. He'll actually take cases of someone being sick and then someone being declared by 5-6 doctors that this is terminally ill and they're going to die and everything, and then churches and people have prayed and stuff like that, and the person's been healed. And so he actually then interviews the doctors afterwards and gets their opinion. So it's like very detailed scientific information and verification. Now, I'm not saying you'll be convinced by it, but I'm just saying that it's a very good book to have a look at.
But is there any examples of like superhuman abilities in it? Like, so someone is walking on water and stuff, and someone is like I don't know, fucking coming back from the grave and stuff. Or is it all medical stuff? So it's like
I've only read bits of it. I've not read it. It's 2 volumes. It's
quite big.
It's like 800 pages. It's a massive tome. His bibliographies are notorious.
Because like from what you said about that, then it's like I could say false positives with a lot of medical stuff. You could have 5 doctors and I can come up with naturalistic explanations for those all day. You could have 5 doctors and every single one could be wrong in every single way. There can be, I mean, okay, for example, take HIV. Was there any example of a miraculous cure of HIV by prayer? That person may have not even had HIV in the first place. Now, does that mean that they didn't have it or it wasn't cured that way? What about all the misses that people have been prayed for and it hasn't worked? And then we would get into another thing that might go too far. It might go into, well, that prayer wasn't answered, right?
I understand what you're saying. I get what you're saying, and there is a point to that. But I do think that Keane is. I'm not saying I agree with everything, but he does a very thorough investigation of these things, and you've got loads of stuff that you can wade into and look at. The thing is we're talking about epistemology as well. Your epistemology is purely a scientific understanding of the way we look at knowledge, and therefore you're bringing that to bear on a miraculous claim. But knowledge is multifaceted and changes within context. So if a miraculous claim is made in a religious context, epistemologically that's different. That's a different context than a scientific context. So,
does it matter which religion makes the miraculous claim? So say if a Muslim makes a miraculous claim for, let's say there's a Christian and a Muslim, right? And they both said that it's their religion that has caused this miraculous effect or has caused someone to be healed of cancer. How do we go about determining which one did it?
Well, the thing is, we would. I don't preclude that miracles can't happen with another religion. The thing is that the point is that you have to be open to the historical continuum, and therefore it's based on testimony. And if there is if the testimony is of good quality and consistent, then according to their presupposition, it's a possibility, mate.
So you have to kind of go back and see if that religion's true in the first place. So you have to go so Christianity's a better religion than being a Muslim. So there's more. I don't get that.
Because with every knowledge claim, whether it be a miracle or scientific, there's always epistemology and presuppositions that you have to bring to bear to that situation. So the miraculous claim, there will be presuppositions to that. So the Christian presupposition of resurrection already precludes the Old Testament, already precludes the God of the Old Testament, yeah? So the scientific naturalist position already precludes by default there is no God.
So, no. Well,
that's not true.
Yeah, that's not true.
It doesn't preclude it. It's the default position, but it's open to evidence.
No, it's not.
No. If a God did exist, then it would essentially become part of nature, and
no. Let's backtrack to the argument. It doesn't necessarily preclude God, but the way it's being used by atheists, some atheists, i.e., yourselves. You've already said yourselves that you would preclude a miracle ever taking place purely on the basis of the physical continuum of the universe, of the way it is.
I'd say that the default position would be that it wasn't a miracle. It doesn't preclude it.
So let me get this straight. So you're now saying that you will look at the historical evidence.
I never said historical. I said repeatable, testable, falsifiable evidence.
Yeah, but you can't. If you're looking at a historical claim of a miracle historically, you cannot repeat.
Exactly. So my default position is that there's more plausible explanations than magic.
So you're proving my point. My point was that the scientific naturalism that you're propounding already pushes out the possibility of a miracle in history.
No, the default position is that there's more plausible explanations than magic. Magic is the least plausible.
Let's get the point straight. Is science does not stand against or for whether there is a God or whether miracles do or do not happen. Science is just a tool.
I agree. Science has
well, Jason, I actually have a plausible explanation for the miracle of turning water into wine.
I'm sure it'll be highly entertaining.
Yeah, I'm sure it will, and it is, and it's plausible, right? Let's go under the assumption that Bible consists of mistranslations. Alright, let's just make the assumption. Alright, so what you do at this wedding at Cana, right, they've totally underestimated the wine they needed to order. And Jesus is there, and he's got his head screwed on. He's a fairly clever fella. And they're saying, we're going to run out of wine. And he says, well, if you think about it, don't be so greedy. You don't need it to be as strong as it is. If you add the same volume of water to it, it'll go twice as far. It won't be as strong, but it'll last you. Right? Fucking hell. Oh, sorry, Jason, I know you like swearing. That's really clever. Hey, but you know what? We'll remember that. It gets written down. Right? Now, I'm saying it's a ridiculous thing to say, but it's a plausible explanation.
It could be a magic trick too, couldn't it? It could just be sleight of hand.
Yeah, again, that's another one. But I'm saying, that is a plausible explanation.
So it wasn't actually water into wine; it was watered down wine.
So okay, all right. So we explain that away, and we explain other miracles away, and so you're still left with the problem.
No, hang on. You've just pushed that aside. What about what you're saying, Jason?
No, I'm not. I'm saying, right, I grant you all that, you've still not solved the problem.
What's the problem?
The problem is, if I granted you all that you've just said, I granted you not only that miracle, but you've proved all the miracles that Jesus did was not true, right? You still got a problem. And
I'm not following you there, Jason. That's not really...
Let's say we don't not prove them true. Let's just say we give decent enough examples.
Let me finish, right? The problem is, you have this person called Jesus Christ, who is one of the most, if not the most influential person in history. That's what I think. And you still then have to explain why he was. And to then deconstruct the miracles out and say, right, give all these various explanations for all these miracles, said they didn't happen, and give the explanations that you've given, it still doesn't answer the question, how did he impact history? How did he impact the early church? And how did he impact it the way he did? I would say that is because he died and rose again. And if you can give me a plausible explanation for why this major historical figure called Jesus Christ influenced history the way he did, on a naturalist basis, then I think you've got a strong argument. So,
why did any person?
The resurrection was just another of those. The resurrection was just another of those miracles. That's all. He was just a charismatic rabbi type.
But how many charismatic rabbis were like him were in his day?
Well, he wasn't the only prophet. Well, the only that turned up.
That's it, Mark. There were quite a few that came and said, "Follow me and do this." So why is he the one that stands out above everybody?
Probably, Jason. They were probably the only one with the sheer balls to go into Jerusalem, riding into Jerusalem. I can take that on. I can take that on trust. Let's just see.
It could just be that someone over-exaggerated all of his stories and believed them. Why does anybody believe any mythology like people used to believe?
The thing is, you haven't demonstrated that magic is required.
Okay, I know you keep saying this, Chris. All right, but why when we look at historical documents, for example, you can look at them, and we have at least 5,000 ancient documents of the New Testament. In terms of that, you've got we got a fragment from I think it's P45, is it from? Well, we've got a little fragment of the Gospel of John that's from the first, or near the end of the 1st century. And then from there we start getting manuscripts from the 2nd century. And within a couple of hundred years we start getting hundreds of manuscripts, and then within 1,000 years we have 5,000 ancient manuscripts now of the New Testament. Now here's the point. When we look at that compared to any ancient document, in terms of closeness, the average closeness of a copy would be 500 years. We start getting copies from Christianity in 200 years. The average copies would be not more than 50 to 100 copies. We have 5,000. So how do you explain this person who people made things up produced the biggest, most well-attested ancient document in ancient history. How do you explain for that?
The last explanation would be magic, and any other one I could think of before would be more plausible.
Yeah, just people over-exaggerating the stories.
Can I mention something about the post-resurrection appearances? Like, the Roman authorities at let's just say we take the Bible and trust. Roman authorities at the behest of the Jews crucified Jesus as a seditionist. That wasn't a Jewish punishment crucifixion. It was a punishment for Roman crime, for crimes against the Roman authority, like treason, sedition, that sort of thing like that. Right. So Jesus then gets out of his tomb and is running around the countryside, and the associated environs for 40 days, continuing his ministry. Now, are you trying to tell me that the Romans wouldn't have caught wind of this, and they would have done one of two things of somebody who they'd heard about who crucified, and was now running about. One of two things would have happened. One, a Roman assassin would have quietly slashed his throat and hidden the body, or two, he would have been clapped in irons and carted off to Rome for further investigation. Not roaming around the countryside with 500 people speaking to him.
Okay.
See what I'm saying?
I've read quite a few stuff on that, mate, and yours is a new take on the historical event, mate.
But can you see where I could get that from?
Oh, mate, I think you're a absolutely funny guy. I think you've got a brilliant sense of humour, mate. Really.
By the way, I'm not trying to be funny, Jason.
I know you're not. I think you've got a brilliant sense of humour, but historical inquiry, I think you need to do a bit more work on, mate.
That isn't historical inquiry. That is common sense.
Wayne, I love you, mate.
He's giving you a hypothetical that if Jesus had returned after all the trouble that he'd caused, the Romans would have investigated it further and not let him wander around spreading further trouble.
This was somebody convicted of a capital offence.
You presume that in the Roman period that they all believe that there were people, and people are not idiots. In the ancient world, there were a lot of skepticism. There were a lot of atheists. There were a lot of skeptics about me.
Yeah, I don't follow your point, Jason.
So the point is, the Romans might have heard that Jesus was popping about, but the vast majority of Romans would have just thought it was a stupid thing.
What, after being crucified, they wouldn't have investigated it?
Don't you think the Jews would have had, the Jews who got Jesus crucified, wouldn't have had something to say about this?
Yeah, they did. It's in the Talmud. It's actually in the Talmud. There's actually an ancient piece of the Talmud that goes back to the 1st century, and it actually it's actually the criminal paper that was given at the Roman authorities, and it talks about how it saw Jesus as a criminal, and the Jews believed that he was hung because of sorcery. And
no, you're missing the point, Jason. What did the Jewish authorities and people who wanted Jesus crucified think of him running around after his crucifixion? You'd have thought they'd have gone back to Rome and said, the man you crucified is running around. Get him again.
No, because there were Jews, there were Pharisees and Sadducees. There were Sadducees who didn't believe in a resurrection. So a lot of people would have been skeptical.
I think you're missing the point I'm making. Somebody who's going around saying, I am the resurrection and the life.
Yeah, and it was, and also Wayne, it was not, it was, it was, he was appearing to his disciples. He was appearing to individuals in his circle, and a wider circle of his disciples. He was not appearing, apart from like people like the Apostle Paul. He wasn't appearing to the enemies or other people like that. So people would have just thought when the early church was preaching about Jesus, they would have believed that the body had been stolen. That's what they would have believed, and they would have maybe investigated that. Well, actually trying to find, they wouldn't have believed that he actually risen from the dead.
Well, they might. Well, they weren't. What about the 500 people that were walking about that had just got out of their graves? Then what happened to them?
Because they did see the difference is those Roman authorities and Jewish leaders, when they killed Jesus, they thought they'd finished him off, and basically, if they heard stories about that, they would have, if they couldn't prove where the body is, they would.
No, I'm talking about all the other people that rose from the grave at the same time as.
So, Mark, I'm just trying to explain the context. So, they would have basically. You made me lose my train of thought there, mate. Two things. They would have. When the people were talking about, when the disciples were saying Jesus risen from the dead, the authorities, if they couldn't produce the body, they would have to just make something up. But if they can't find the body, there's nothing they can do.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm talking about all the other people that rose from the dead.
It's not about the zombies.
All the others that rose from the dead. As Jesus was being crucified, the Bible says that other graves opened and all the dead were walking around. What happened to them?
Yeah, but there's two issues there. In 1 Corinthians 15, it's very clear. It says over 500 saw him, and no historical.
No.
No, Jason, you're not listening.
No, I am.
I'm talking about the other people that rose from the dead, not Jesus or the people that saw him.
Okay.
We're talking about the other
graves open.
All the graves opened, didn't they?
I know, Mark. Just listen.
Right. So what happened to all those other dead people?
Listen, let me just finish. I'll get to that. I'm going to explain it to you, mate. The first thing is that there were appearances to over 500 in 1 Corinthians 15. I'll get to what you're saying. It says very clearly that 500 saw him, right? Now, no historical information has gone against that. What you're talking about is these people who were who came from the grave and what have you, right? Well, my argument for that is two things. First of all, there's very clearly a causal connection between the rise of Christianity spreading and taking over the Roman Empire. And so it shows that there was an unusual event going on in the first century.
Hang on, you've just rode roughshod over that, Jason.
No. So the fact that these individuals that came up from the grave, the fact that Christianity spread over the empire and did what it did, shows you that there was some kind of supernatural thing.
No, it doesn't. I want to know what happened to all the people that rose from the dead, along with Jesus. Where there was no mention of them, nobody spoke to them, asked them about their experiences of being dead and coming back to life. The same as no one interviewed or went to speak to Lazarus when he was reanimated.
Why didn't he use a little more magic and make it spread a little further?
Because you're assuming that in that time people just believed things willy-nilly. People were skeptics in those days. There were.
I know that. You're not answering the question.
No, I am answering the question.
What happened to all the other dead bodies that were walking around?
Mark, may I clarify that question a bit though, Jason? The bodies that reanimated when Jesus was crucified, at the moment of Jesus' death, right? What state were those bodies in? Which were they recent burials? Were they skeletons? When they came out of their graves, how long did they remain reanimated? Were they sentient? Were they just like golems?
Do you want me to give you their address?
It'd help.
Do you want me to
No,
give the
no. But do you see the point I'm making?
You want me to give
It's
the
the biblical reference to it, Jason.
Do you want me to give the age? I'll give.
No, of course
you're
not.
You're
You
missing
could
the
just
point.
answer
Jason.
his. You could answer his question instead
Whitewashing
of
the question instead of
answer a
answering.
question he didn't ask.
The address, the
No,
age,
no,
color
you're
of the
missing
shirt.
the point of the question, Jason.
No, do you see what I'm getting at?
No.
No,
You're
you're missing
asking-
the point of the question.
No, I'm answering it. If you want me to, the fact is, I can't give you the address where they lived. I can't give you.
That's just being silly. I asked
That's
you,
silly.
why does the Bible not further mention,
Point is,
or there's no historical record of this miraculous event of 500 dead bodies wandering around Jerusalem, wandering around all over the place?
you're using this very simplistic understanding of history.
Jason, if you don't know, just say you don't know.
Yeah,
No,
just say you've
I
got.
gotta go, you guys. But it was nice talking to you,
Cheers,
Jason. When you
Chris.
come back,
Right. No, the point is, what I'm trying to get at is what you're using is you're using an argument of silence. That doesn't disprove the resurrection.
No, what I'm saying is the Romans would have recorded such a miraculous event.
No, they wouldn't, because they didn't even know. No, that's not true. It was only like about 40 years after the resurrection that the Romans started to get the radar of Christianity, the problem in the Roman Empire. When Jesus died and rose again, the Roman Empire just saw it as part of Judaism. They didn't see it as a new movement to
sorry.
life.
There were people that saw dead bodies rise from the dead, and no one thought to write it down or record it.
Yeah, but the Roman Empire did not see. The Roman authorities did not see Christianity as a major thing, so they're not going to.
They would have noticed 500 dead bodies walking around, Jason. You're missing the point.
No, they wouldn't, because
They wouldn't.
No, they wouldn't, because they didn't see it. They didn't see Christianity was not important. Jesus was crucified as a criminal.
Christianity's irrelevant. Someone would have noticed 500 dead bodies rise from the grave and wander around the town.
Number one, you're presuming that Judaism was basically the same.
It says so in the Bible. You're not answering the question.
I am answering the question.
You're not.
No, I am. I'm answering it in a very responsible, historical way. And if you listen,
Not historical, Jason.
I'm giving you the best.
You said that the Romans wouldn't have noticed 500 reanimated bodies walking around that had been dead not minutes before. The same as if my local graveyard suddenly emptied and all the bodies got up and walked around the village, I'd sure as hell someone would have noticed it.
No, because you're presuming a lot of things that is not in the text. You're presuming what kind of bodies they were. You're presuming the kind of the event. Yes, you are. You're reading into the.
Well, they were dead for a start.
The point is tons of evidence for the whole spectrum of the resurrection. On this dead body stuff, I'll encourage people to go and Google argument from silence. This is what the guys are using. Now, for example, I'll give you an example.
No, I'm just asking you what you thought happened to all these dead bodies wandering around.
Listen, no, Mark, I don't have to know everything about a historical event. Listen.
But you do if you're trying to make sure, if you're trying to prove it happened, you need to provide some evidence.
No, I need to, so long as I've got a good plausibility structure for the main points.
Well, all right, let's cut the chase. Very briefly, Jason.
No, let me finish.
The dead bodies.
No, Wayne.
Who were they?
Wayne, I'm going to finish. In knowledge, you have plausibility structure. There is plausibility structure for the death of Christ, the empty tomb, and the resurrection. Right? It's like evolution. If someone brought up some major clunk of evidence 100 years ago about evolution, if you've got billions of years of so-called evidence, that little bit of evidence does not trump the bigger evidence. I don't agree with evolution.
Jason.
Listen. So long as you've got good evidence for the plausibility structure. Now, you're using an argument from silence. I'll give you an example.
Yeah, but I get what an argument from silence is, but aren't you using one? You're coming to a conclusion about what happened to these 500 dead
I'm going to give you two examples because it's very important.
Okay.
In the time of Philo visited Jerusalem, and he never mentioned Gamaliel. Now, does that mean that Gamaliel never existed because he never mentions Gamaliel when he visited Jerusalem? No. Another example.
It means we can't know. It means we can't draw a conclusion.
A famous explorer visited China. I think it was Marco Polo or someone. Visited China, and he never mentions the Great Wall of China. Does that mean the Great Wall of China never existed?
No, well, what we're saying, Jason, is that this miraculous event of dead bodies walking around would have been recorded by somebody, or at least the Romans' attention would have been called to it.
Even
and
if
they
it
would send
wasn't,
someone to investigate.
even if it wasn't recorded, you're making an argument from science because you're drawing a conclusion when there isn't any evidence to say that they did. These 500, these lots of people did rise from the dead. So you're the one using an argument from science. We're just countering to how you actually think that's so.
I'm not using the
It's
argument.
all part of the resurrection thing. If you're trying to show that it happened, or you're trying to show that the Bible is true,
Mark,
you have to account for it somehow.
okay, Mark, we're having a discussion. Let me just.
Yeah.
No, you're using the argument from silence. Let me just come in here a minute. I just want to say something, which is really important. Just say something again. Sorry, I've just lost it. If you keep interrupting me, Mark, I can't keep my train of thought. You need to let me speak. You need to speak, then be quiet and let me speak, because you're making me lose my train of thought, mate. Okay. So if you want to say something, I need to, and then I can just read.
Oh yeah, sure. But I would like an answer, and you're not giving one.
Okay, fellas. Jaybo, it's very late, matey, and there's a certain amount of shotgun going on, and I'm not trying to defend it or be aggressive to anybody, but it's late, Jaybo, and you know how you get when it gets a bit later on. That's all I want to say at the moment.
All right, mate. Yeah, it is. Thanks a lot, mate. Argument from silence. My argument against that is Christianity has basic facts for the main facts. You can't know everything in a historical situation. Here's the point that I wanted to say, Mark. It's come to me. Which would be the most important, Mark? The resurrection of Christ or 500 people being rose from the dead? Which would be the most important?
The most important to Christians would be the resurrection, obviously. But I'm not talking about Christians. I'm talking about the other.
Let me finish. It would be Jesus. Listen.
I was talking there.
Yeah, okay, but listen. The most important would be Jesus, and yet the Roman authorities never mention it, and also the Jews never mention it. So if they're not going to mention about Jesus' resurrection, which is more important, why are they going to mention the 500?
Well, I agree. That gives me the idea that probably neither happened.
And if they did mention the 500, it would actually prove that Jesus rose from the dead, which means the Pharisees would actually lose their authority and position. They're not going to actually defend a position, and also Caesar was seen as the Son of God. So if these people rose from the dead and the Romans reported it, it would have mean that Caesar would have not been Caesar and Jesus would have been king and the Roman Empire would have collapsed there and then. So they're not going to follow and back up Christianity. Okay. Mark, I'm going to go in a minute. All right.
Okay.
I've just come to say
good luck, all the best.
Goodbye and take care, Mark. All right.
Good luck, all the best.
And to all of you, to you, Wayne, and to you, Ray, and to everybody else.
Hang on, Jaybo. You've got to do closing statements, mate.
I was going to say, Jason, if I know you're going, but if I do read that you told me to read, can we talk about it? Because like if I'm going to go through and read it, if I find anything like of interest through it, it doesn't have to be recorded or anything.
Okay. Yeah.
Just, I don't care about them going live or not. I don't care about there being a record of it. I think sometimes it's better that there's not. You know what I mean? I'll go through it, and I'll see if there's anything in it that just from even if it's just to understand it better, to get your position better. Because if that's something that's important to you, if I can read it and get a little bit from it, I'll see that maybe if that can square something with me, why it's better for you.
Okay. Thanks, man. Okay.
Jason, I'm going to pop off because it's bedtime for me. So nice speaking to you, pal.
All right, you too, man. Okay.
See you, Jason.
See you, mate. Okay, I'll make a closing statement then for Natalie.
Yeah, and don't forget our closing statements, Jaybo.
All right. I just want to say thanks for coming in. I really appreciated it, and I really appreciated the discussion tonight. And I'm just sorry that I let you down over the years. I didn't preach the gospel. and I'm just apologise for any mistakes I've made, and I just wish everybody the best. And if anyone wants to catch up with me, you can Skype me on jason.burns107 if you want to chat about things that we've discussed tonight. And I just wish everybody the best.
Yeah, this kind of Jason is kind of Jason that everybody likes, you know, when you're not like calling people out, and when you can just actually have a conversation. That's I'm sure we all appreciate that.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be that we have to agree. I mean, it doesn't have to be. You can have friends and you can have conversations where it doesn't have to turn into a shit fest. But at the same time, you know, if I can learn anything from it, even if it's more about myself, I think that's constructive. And I think that's a way to go forward with anything.
Okay, right, thanks. Anybody else before I go?
Yeah, well, if it's my turn, Jaybo. Before you bugger off, you've got to do the Socratic Club. You've got to get the founder members back, and you've got to hold a hangout for everybody.
Right.
Oh, don't hurt me. You've got to come and make a Socratic Club for all the founder members. Everybody's been here a long time with you. You can't just disappear. Not going to let you do it.
Right. Well.
No, as you would say. Don't be giggling and laughing. No, you've got to hold a hangout for the Socratic Club. The people have been with you for 5 years. Come on now. Let me see that smiley face. Come on.
Natalie, this is my last video, mate. Honest, I can't do anything.
No. You've got to come and have a Socratic Club membership. You've got to do it, Jaybo. Come on.
No, I just want to say to the Socratic Club, the old members there, just love to everyone, and I just wish you all the best. But I've got to leave, Natalie, mate. And thanks for coming on, everyone. And,
I've sat here for an hour, Jaybo, waiting to talk to you. There's a lot of people who want to say ta to you if you're going to bugger off for real. And you've got to hold a hangout for people who've been here for 5 years. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, if people want to talk to me, they can Skype me and we can have a hangout on Skype private.
Well, we don't have Skype, Jaybo. Come on now.
All right. We'll see, Natalia. I can't promise, mate. But I just want to wish everybody and any fans out there appreciate your time.
Okay, all the best, Jason.
If you want to contact me, it's jason.burns107, no capital letters. And love to everybody out there. And thanks for putting up with me. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, see you.
All right. Take care.